Welcome to Red Flags, Green Flags, Navigating the Modern Dating Landscape, an insightful audiobook brought to you by Mindful Literary. Whether you are just beginning your dating journey or have been navigating the dating world for years, this audiobook is designed to be your companion, guide, and mentor. In the ever-evolving world of dating, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the myriad of choices, expectations, and mixed signals. This audiobook aims to demystify the dating process by providing practical advice and actionable insights that will help you recognize both red flags and green flags in potential partners. We'll start by exploring the dating game, setting the stage for your new beginning and comparing the dynamics of online and offline dating. Moving forward, we'll dive deep into the crucial warning signs in red flags and teach you how to trust your gut and handle toxic behavior. In contrast, green flags will shine a light on positive communication skills, respect, support, and healthy boundaries. As we navigate mixed signals, master the art of flirting, and understand love languages, you'll gain a clearer picture of what you want and deserve in a relationship. We'll also delve into the power of vulnerability, dating etiquette, and the importance of letting go of past relationships to fully embrace self-love and independence. This journey is not just about finding the right partner, but also about finding and loving yourself. With chapters on compatibility, redefining gender roles, building trust, maintaining independence in committed relationships, and embracing love and empathy, this audiobook offers a holistic approach to dating and relationships. Join us on this transformative journey as we uncover the red and green flags that can either hinder or help you find the love and happiness you seek. Let's embark on this adventure together, fostering meaningful connections and creating a loving, supportive environment in which you can thrive. Chapter 1: The Dating Game. A New Beginning. It's a crisp morning, and as I pull open the curtains, I'm greeted by the first rays of sunlight gently cascading into my living room. There's a certain kind of magic in the air today, a sense that something new is about to unfold. Maybe it's the faint whiff of fresh possibilities or the tender feeling of hope nestling in my heart, but it's undeniable. Today feels different. My phone buzzes with a new notification. I glance at the screen to see a message from Sarah, my best friend since childhood. "How about drinks tonight? Heard about this new bar downtown," she texts. I pause for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It's been ages since I allowed myself to think about dating, to open my heart to the sheer potential of what could be. Living in the shadows of past heartbreaks had become my norm. Every new encounter, every hopeful glance, had been met with the silent weight of old scars. Today, however, I decided that it was time to change the narrative. I typed back a quick count me in, and felt a surge of adrenaline. Saying yes was the first step toward letting go and embracing a new chapter. Later that evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my outfit for the umpteenth time, I couldn't help but smile at the person staring back. There was nervousness, sure, but underlying that was a burgeoning sense of excitement. Every moment spent ruminating on what-ifs was being replaced with why-nots, and it was intoxicating. Walking into the bar, the ambient music and the hum of conversations welcomed me. The place was teeming with life, an orchestration of laughter, clinking glasses, and soft whispers. Sarah waved enthusiastically from a corner table, and beside her sat an unfamiliar face with an easy smile. My heart skipped a beat as Sarah introduced us. "This is Alex, a friend from work." There was a softness in Alex's eyes that put me at ease immediately. The evening flowed seamlessly. Drinks were shared, stories told, and for the first time in a long while, I felt unshackled from the chains of my past. Alex and I talked about everything and nothing, the conversation spiraling into pockets of shared laughter and silent understanding. With each passing moment, the barriers I'd built seemed to dissolve, leaving room for genuine connection. As the night progressed, the bustling bar seemed to fade into the background. There was a comfort in Alex's presence that felt both familiar and exhilaratingly new. We walked out into the cold night air, and under the dim glow of the streetlights, time appeared to stand still. I found myself daring to hope, allowing the warmth of the moment to seep into my wary heart. As we said our goodbyes, Alex's eyes searched mine. "I'd love to see you again," Alex said, voice soft but sure. My heart fluttered, the words resonating deeply within me. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe in new beginnings, in the beauty of the unexpected. Walking home, I felt a buoyant sense of optimism. The night had whispered promises of what could be, of new chapters ready to be written. And as I reached my doorstep, I allowed myself one last glance at the twinkling city lights, my heart brimming with hope and the exhilarating prospect of a fresh start. Setting expectations. As I sat across the small, intimate table from Emily, I couldn't help but notice how the flickering candlelight softened the edges of her face, making her look almost ethereal. This was our third date, and while I was undeniably attracted to her, I knew it was time for a serious conversation. Setting expectations was not just a necessity. It was a compass guiding us towards a future, or possibly preventing us from wasting each other's time. "Emily," I began, my voice a bit hesitant but firm. Her eyes met mine, curious but receptive. "I think it's important for us to talk about what we're both looking for in a relationship. I value honesty and clarity, and it's important for me to set clear and realistic expectations." She nodded, leaning in slightly. "I appreciate that. It's so easy to misinterpret intentions if everything isn't laid out. So, what are you looking for?" Taking a deep breath, I said, "I want a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. I don't expect perfection, but I do expect effort, communication, and a willingness to work through challenges together. What about you?" Her eyes sparkled with understanding. "I want the same. I've had my share of relationships where expectations weren't clear, and it led to unnecessary heartache. I need someone who understands my need for independence, but also cherishes the moments we share together." It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We were on the same page, a crucial first step in any meaningful relationship. We talked more about our individual goals, the importance of personal space, and how we envisioned our future evolving. Each word, each shared thought, felt like another brick laid in the foundation of something potentially wonderful. As the night went on, our conversation deepened, touching on past experiences and lessons learned. I realized that setting expectations was not just about stating what we wanted, but about truly understanding and accepting what the other person needed. It was about creating a balanced dynamic, where both partners felt valued and heard. As we walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air a refreshing contrast to the warmth inside, I felt a sense of clarity and hope. For the first time in a long while, I had the feeling that this relationship had the potential to be something real, something lasting. And it all started with setting those crucial expectations, ensuring we were both walking the same path. We stopped under a street lamp, its soft glow creating a gentle ambience around us. Emily turned towards me, her smile radiant. "I'm glad we had this talk," she said quietly. "It makes me feel like we're building something real." I squeezed her hand gently. "Me too, Emily. Me too." In that moment, beneath the glowing light, I felt a connection that promised endless possibilities. Maybe life didn't have to be so complicated after all, as long as we both knew what we wanted and were willing to work towards it together. Online versus offline dating. The appeal of online dating was, admittedly, an affair with algorithms. Instead of relying on fortuitous encounters, I had a world of potential matches at my fingertips, each profile teasing me with snippets of data and the promise of compatibility. The endless scroll of faces felt intoxicating at first. Here, I could be anyone. My best photos showcased my personality quirks, each message crafted to reflect charm and wit, carefully curated to attract the right swipes. But there was the inherent paradox. In this digital arena of honesty, it was shockingly simple to lose authenticity. Online dating unquestionably offered unparalleled convenience. No longer did I endure awkward small talk in packed bars, shout over loud music, or summon the courage for a cold approach. Instead, I leveraged multiple platforms: Tinder for the thrill, Bumble for the feminist edge, and OkCupid for more in-depth connections. Each app had its own user base, algorithms, and quirks. It felt like a game, and with each swipe, I hoped to level up. But behind the screen, the reality was different. Conversations flowed freely in the digital space, but the transition to real life was a different beast. I found myself overthinking how each chat translated to actual date compatibility. Was their profile photo misleading? Did our textual chemistry equate to physical attraction? Setting up video calls became a litmus test, balancing the virtual allure with a glimpse of reality. Yet, no amount of video calls could replace the electric hum of in-person interaction. Too often, I discovered that the spark in text fizzes out under the pressure of tangible silence, the weight of expectation looming large. Balancing these platforms became a delicate act of patience and discernment, leaving me often questioning if I was connecting with the person, or just the persona. Offline dating, on the other hand, harkened back to serendipitous encounters, the unspoken chemistry sparking through shared glances across a room. It demanded courage and spontaneity. Here, there was no buffer of edited photos or delayed, thought-out responses. Every interaction was raw, unfiltered. I craved these moments, the immediacy and thrill of someone's real-time reaction to my presence. Offline dating felt honest. It was instinctual and primal in a seemingly over-sophisticated world. But with authenticity came vulnerability, each rejection stinging sharper, each approach burdened with the fear of intrusion. Bars, parties, and even grocery store aisles became hunting grounds for potential connections, each public space a stage for understated flirtation. The tactile world's unpredictability forced me to be more present, to read body language, to interpret subtle nuances of tone, a skill set blunted by the emoticon-laden texts of the digital realm. Conversations felt deeper, layered with the context of shared environments and common experiences. Yet, the offline world wasn't without its frustrations. Geographic and social limitations narrowed the pool, hinging hopes on location and circumstance, a stark contrast to the boundless options online platforms promised. Balancing the two worlds became an art. Online dating expanded the horizon, offering prospects I'd never cross paths with in daily routines, while offline dating kept me grounded, a reminder of the genuine human touch. Navigating this dual landscape demanded a new approach, integrating virtual interactions with real-life experiences. Coffee dates became preliminary screenings. If the chemistry was there, date 2 was a more elaborate affair. It felt like threading two realms together, learning to trust the digital spark while honoring the authenticity of human connection. In the end, the merging of these paths wasn't just a compromise. It was a richer, fuller journey toward meaningful connection. Chapter 2: Red Flags. Recognizing warning signs. It's a Friday night and the bar is buzzing with excitement. Somewhere between dealing with work deadlines and the gentle pressure of social gatherings, I find myself here, gulping down a cold beer. But tonight isn't about just any random social gathering. It's about a first date with someone new, someone who might turn into something more, or so I hope. Elena, was it? We met through a dating app, like so many these days. Her pictures radiated a sense of adventure, hiking, laughing with friends, always in motion. There was an electricity in our short conversations, a promise of something bright. When I arrived at the bar, she was already there, nursing a glass of red wine and engrossed in her phone. It took her a while to notice me, which felt surprisingly awkward for an initial encounter. "Hey," I greeted her, mustering as much charm as I could. Her reaction was delayed, as if she were deciding whether I was worth her attention. Red flag number 1, I thought, but dismissed it quickly. Maybe she was just nervous or distracted. As the night unfolded, more unease crept into our conversation. When I asked about her job, she gave a succinct, almost dismissive answer before pivoting the conversation back towards herself. "Enough about work," she said abruptly, "let's talk about something fun." Her stories, though entertaining, were punctuated with strange details, like her ex-boyfriend's inadequacies or her frequent encounters with people who just didn't understand her. It was during one of these tales that her behavior turned from quirky to concerning. Her eyes darkened when discussing her roommate who had borrowed her clothes without asking. I was so mad, I slashed them to shreds. "That'll teach her," she quipped with a wicked smile. I tried to laugh it off, but there it was, a bone-chilling red flag. Who reacts so violently over such a minor issue? At this point, my internal alarms were blaring, but against my better judgment, I continued the date. I told myself that everyone has bad stories and moments they regret. However, Elena's unpredictability was like a storm cloud, hovering ominously as she pivoted from laughter to rage in seconds. She mentioned she hated boundaries and that people often fail to appreciate her honesty. I couldn't help but wonder if that so-called honesty was a mask for rudeness and lack of empathy. Nearing the end of our date, Elena grew increasingly agitated and impatient. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone light to avoid provoking her further. She responded with an exaggerated sigh, "I just hate waiting. It's disrespectful." I realized that even a slight delay of the bar tab felt like a personal insult to her. Another glaring sign that her patience was razor thin. As we parted ways, her kiss was more aggressive than passionate, leaving me cold and uneasy. It's clear now that these subtle, unsettling moments were my watchtower guards, signals springing up like flares. Ignoring them would have led me down a treacherous path of continual disappointment and risk. Everyone deserves someone who can manage their emotions with grace, not volatility. Recognizing those red flags early on can save us from heartache, and tonight was a perfect lesson in that. Trust your gut. Dating in the modern world felt like navigating a labyrinth blindfolded. Each time I stepped into the realm of first dates, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. After all, isn't everyone in search of that elusive connection? The one that sets your soul on fire? My journey through countless dates taught me a crucial lesson: the importance of trusting my gut. This silent voice, often overshadowed by external opinions and societal expectations, became my most reliable guide. I'm reminded of a date I once had with a man named Jack. He was charming, successful, and checked all the right boxes. Yet, something didn't sit well with me. Maybe it was the way his eyes darted around the room, or how his laugh always seemed a split second too late. As the night progressed, my initial unease turned into a gut-wrenching sensation. I tried to push it aside, questioning my instincts and thinking I was being unreasonable. But that voice inside persisted. It whispered warnings that were hard to ignore. I decided to cut the date short, much to Jack's surprise. That night, as I sat in my apartment, I replayed our conversations and his subtle quirks, realizing that what I felt wasn't unfounded. Sometimes, it's not about having concrete evidence, but recognizing when something simply feels off. Several weeks later, I discovered through mutual friends that Jack had a reputation for being manipulative and dishonest. While the realization was unsettling, it validated my decision to trust my instincts. This experience cemented the importance of listening to that inner voice. I learned that it's not about finding reasons to explain intuition, but understanding that this hidden compass often perceives things our conscious mind misses. In subsequent dates, I began honing this skill of listening and recognizing what felt right or wrong. I met people who seemed perfect on paper, only to find my gut steering me away. Conversely, I encountered those who didn't fit the conventional mold, yet something deep inside clicked seamlessly. It was on these dates that connections flourished, grounded in authenticity and mutual respect. Learning to trust your gut is a journey in itself. It requires patience, introspection, and often, the courage to walk away from situations that superficially seem perfect. But the reward is invaluable, a heightened sense of self-awareness and a clearer path to genuine relationships. As you navigate the intricate dance of dating, remember to give voice to your instincts. Tune into that inner whisper and trust its guidance. After all, it's not just about finding someone who looks right beside you, but finding someone who feels right within you. Dealing with toxic behavior. It was a crisp autumn evening when I first began to understand the true nature of toxicity in relationships. The leaves had started to turn, painting the streets in shades of gold and crimson. I remember the exact moment I realized something was profoundly wrong. It wasn't a grand revelation or a single incident, but rather a series of small, insidious moments that cumulatively felt like a weight on my chest. I was sitting across from Julia, my partner of 2 years, at our favorite cafe when it hit me. Julia had a way of making me feel unraveled, yet entangled at the same time. Her criticisms, masked as casual observations, had begun to chip away at my confidence. "Do you really think that's a good idea?" she would often say, raising an eyebrow at my suggestions about anything from career moves to weekend plans. Initially, I dismissed these as minor disagreements, but they grew more frequent and cutting. Each remark was like a tiny shard of glass, almost imperceptible by itself, but excruciating when they started to accumulate. As I began to piece together the puzzle, I understood the nature of her toxic behavior. It wasn't about violent outbursts or dramatic confrontations, but subtle manipulations and emotional put-downs. Toxicity, I learned, can be both overt and covert, making it harder to recognize and even harder to address. One night, while sharing my growing concerns with a close friend, she gently nudged me towards a term that made me uncomfortable, but also resonated deeply: gaslighting. Julia's dismissals and invalidations were starting to make me question my own reality. Armed with this newfound understanding, I began to explore strategies to deal with the toxicity I had identified. Setting boundaries was the first and most crucial step. I learned to assert my feelings without guilt or fear of retribution. "I feel hurt when I'm dismissed," I told Julia one evening, my voice trembling but steady. To my relief, she seemed to take it in stride initially, promising to be more considerate. But old habits die hard, and the change was only temporary. The final straw came during a heated argument about something trivial, like where to place the newly bought bookshelf. Her words stung more than usual that night, cutting deeper than ever before. "You always make things difficult. No wonder you're such a failure." The words echoed in my mind long after they were spoken. It was a moment of clarity. I realized it was not just about the content of the words, but the intention behind them. I needed more than temporary fixes. Knowing when to walk away is, perhaps, the toughest lesson in dealing with toxic behavior. It requires us to confront our fears of loneliness and the unknown. The night I decided to leave, the air felt colder, the silence around me more profound. Every step away from Julia's house was a step towards reclaiming my own sense of self-worth. The journey to recovery wasn't immediate, but it was necessary and profoundly liberating. In hindsight, I understood that recognizing and addressing toxic behavior isn't just about dealing with the other person, but also about healing oneself. It's about understanding that true relationships are built on mutual respect and growth, not on power dynamics or emotional manipulation. The path wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I found solace in the idea that every end is a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, learn, and grow. And as the autumn leaves turned to winter frost, I felt the onset of my own personal spring, a rebirth of sorts, knowing I had emerged stronger from the storm. Chapter 3: Green Flags. Positive Communicative Skills. I remember the first moment I realized the true power of positive communication. I was sitting across from Tara in a dimly lit cafe, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans swirling around us. She had just shared a deeply personal story about her childhood, and instead of my usual habit of throwing in a hurried, half-thought-out response, I decided to really listen. As I leaned in slightly, maintaining eye contact, and subtly nodding, I noticed her shoulders relax. She saw that I was genuinely engaged, and her words flowed more easily. This led me to understand that effective communication is much more about listening than speaking. It's about creating a space where the other person feels heard and valued. I realized that reflecting back what I heard, without judgment, can make a huge difference. "It sounds like that was really challenging for you," I reflected softly after she finished. The way her eyes softened told me that my effort to listen empathetically was making a real connection. Another cornerstone of positive communication, I discovered, is expressing myself clearly when it's my turn to speak. This means being honest about my feelings and thoughts without coming off as confrontational or defensive. It's about finding the fine balance between assertiveness and aggression. When I first started dating Clara, I often struggled with how to bring up difficult topics. But then, I learned to own my feelings. Instead of saying, "You never spend enough time with me," I reframed it to, "I feel a bit neglected when we don't get to hang out as often. Can we make some plans together?" The difference in her response was like night and day. Over time, I saw how these skills not only improved my romantic relationships, but also strengthened my connections with friends and family. My grandma, an old school woman who rarely showed emotion, once told me over the phone how much she appreciated my patience and understanding. "You make me feel heard," she said, her voice quivering with unexpected affection. Each conversation became an opportunity to build a bridge, rather than dig a moat. As I practiced more, it felt less like a chore and more like a natural part of interacting with others. The walls I'd unknowingly built around myself started to crumble, replaced by open doors and inviting pathways. And then, I came across a moment where my new skills were put to the ultimate test. Ivy, a brilliant and fiery woman I met at a mutual friends gathering, had opinions as strong as her presence. Our first date felt like verbal fencing, each of us testing the other with sharp wit and probing questions. But I remembered to stay present and listen, to understand before jumping to be understood. As the night went on, our conversations turned from a sparring match into a dance, moving fluidly from light banter to serious revelations. It was thrilling, and yet, just the beginning of something even more profound. Respect and support. From the moment I first saw Emma, I knew she was the one. Her laughter was infectious, her smile was radiant, and her presence was like a breath of fresh air. But as we navigated through the early days of our relationship, one thing quickly became clear. Mutual respect and support were not just nice-to-haves, they were essential. In the early stages, everything felt like a whirlwind of excitement and discovery. We'd spend hours talking, exploring each other's worlds, and planning our future adventures. But it wasn't long before we hit our first bump. A petty argument over something as trivial as where to eat that night spiraled into a full-blown confrontation. That night, I learned my first lesson in respect. It wasn't about winning the argument. It was about understanding her perspective. Emma and I decided to sit down and have a heart-to-heart. She shared her feelings openly, and so did I. It was in that vulnerable exchange that I realized how vital it was to truly listen, not just hear. Listening to understand rather than to reply. That conversation laid the foundation for mutual respect in our relationship. We promised to always consider each other's feelings and viewpoints, even when we disagreed. Support went hand in hand with respect. When Emma lost her job, she was devastated. Her confidence took a hit, and for a while, she was a shadow of her usual vibrant self. I knew that my role was not to fix her problems, but to stand by her side and lift her up. Encouraging her during her job search, celebrating small victories, and simply being there for her made all the difference. On the flip side, she supported me through my struggles too, whether it was a stressful project at work or dealing with family issues. As our relationship grew stronger, we became each other's rock. Her victories felt like my own, and my challenges were ours to face together. We created an unspoken pact to carry one another through the highs and lows. This mutual support wasn't just about grand gestures, it was in the little things: a cup of tea on a stressful day, a reassuring hug before a big meeting, or a late-night talk when worries kept us awake. These small acts built a reservoir of trust and loyalty that fortified our bond. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves at a quaint little cafe, tucked away from the bustling city life. As we sipped our coffee and gazed out at the falling rain, a thought struck me. It wasn't the grand, sweeping moments that defined our relationship, but these quiet, shared moments of connection and understanding. I looked at Emma, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the cafe lights, and felt a swell of gratitude. Respect and support had not just built a strong foundation for our relationship, they had woven a tapestry of love that was rich and enduring. It was then I truly understood: respect and support were not just actions but a way of being. They were the lifeblood of our relationship, nourishing it, making it thrive. As I held Emma's hand, I silently pledged to keep nurturing these vital elements, to keep growing together. And I knew in that moment that as long as we had mutual respect and unwavering support, we could weather any storm that came our way. Healthy boundaries. It all began when I noticed a subtle shift in my relationship with Emily. It wasn't that we were drifting apart, but rather that our connection felt strained. The laughter we once shared now echoed hollowly, and every conversation seemed to end in a quiet tension. We loved each other, without a doubt. But somehow, we had fallen into a rhythm of dependence that was slowly eroding our individuality. The realization hit me one evening when Emily asked if we could spend the upcoming weekend apart. Her request caught me off guard, and I felt a pang of insecurity. Were we in trouble, or was she simply asking for space? In that moment, I had a choice: react with fear or approach it with understanding. Taking a deep breath, I chose the latter. Of course, I replied, trying to mask the uncertainty in my voice. I think that would be good for both of us. That weekend apart was an eye-opener. Initially, I struggled with the silence of my apartment, finding solace in old hobbies I had abandoned. Slowly but surely, I began to realize how much I had neglected my own well-being. When we reunited, we both had a renewed sense of self. Emily looked radiant. Her time alone had done her good. "I missed you," she said, her eyes softening. "Me too," I admitted, feeling a weight lift off my chest. But I think it was important. The decision to honor and respect each other's need for space allowed us to discover the importance of setting boundaries. These boundaries were not walls to keep each other out, but rather structures to protect our individual well-being. Communicating our needs became a priority, and we realized it wasn't just about being together, but being healthy and happy individuals in the relationship. We started discussing our expectations, openly and without judgment. "I need at least one evening a week just for myself," Emily confessed during one of our conversations. "I tend to lose myself if I don't have that time to recharge." It was my turn to be honest. "I need time for my hobbies, especially my writing. It helps me process my thoughts." Encouraged by our openness, we set these boundaries as a mutual agreement. We created a rhythm that balanced togetherness and personal space. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, but we learned to navigate through them with trust and respect. One particular evening stands out when I was engrossed in my writing, fully absorbed in my own world. Emily walked in, saw me working, and retreated quietly without interrupting. She respected my space, and I, in turn, made sure to check in with her later. Maintaining these boundaries fostered a sense of security and trust. We knew we could rely on each other, while also respecting our need for individuality. It wasn't just about giving space, but about caring enough to ensure the well-being of the person you love. Our relationship flourished as we nurtured it with healthy boundaries. We found that by safeguarding our own happiness, we could truly share it with each other. And as I looked back on our journey, I realized that the key to a thriving relationship lies not in the absence of boundaries, but in the presence of ones that support and enrich our connection. Feeling hopeful, I turned to Emily one night after dinner. "I think we've come a long way," I said, holding her hand. "And I love where we're heading." Her smile was all the confirmation I needed. "Me too," she said, squeezing my hand. "Me too." Chapter 4. Navigating Mixed Signals. Understanding Ambiguity. Dating in today's world feels a lot like navigating a maze. Every turn might lead to excitement or a dead end, and the signs are rarely clear. I remember the first date I had with Sasha, an enigmatic woman with a laugh that lit up the room. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated me, but the mystery she embodied. Yet, as days turned into weeks, I found myself oscillating between moments of exhilarating connection and bewildering silence. Was she interested or just being polite? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making me question every text and every gesture. The reality is, ambiguity is an inevitable part of dating. I learned early on that not every relationship unfolds like a straightforward narrative. There's a certain art to deciphering the unsaid, an almost telepathic skill that gets honed with experience. Rather than seeking absolute clarity from the outset, I began to appreciate the subtleties. That fleeting touch on the arm, the prolonged glance, even the pauses in conversation, each carried its own weight, its own meaning. But how does one navigate this murky water without losing sanity? I realize that communication is key, yet it's not just about talking. It's about listening, observing, and sometimes asking the right questions. Do you remember that scene in the coffee shop? Sasha and I sat across from each other, a half-eaten croissant between us. I asked her directly, and gently, about the moments she pulled away. Her response was a revelation, not just about her but about the fears and nuances that all of us carry. She spoke of past hurts and the protective walls she built, not as a rejection of me, but as a defense mechanism. Understanding ambiguity isn't about eliminating uncertainty, it's about managing it with grace. I started valuing honest conversations over assumptions. Every relationship has its own rhythm and flow, and sometimes, it's in the imperfect, messy parts that true intimacy grows. When Sasha shared her vulnerabilities, it allowed me to share mine as well. We were no longer two strangers charting unknown territory independently. We became co-pilots, navigating the unpredictable skies of dating. Mixed signals and unclear intentions, I learned, are part of the dance. They test our patience, our willingness to empathize, and our ability to remain steadfast in our pursuit of connection. It's easy to let fear dictate actions, pulling back at the first sign of ambiguity. However, embracing the unknown, seeking clarity through compassionate inquiry, and being open to the possibility of missteps can transform the dating experience from a trial into an adventure. As I reflect on my journey with Sasha, I see how moments of uncertainty were not obstacles, but opportunities for deeper connection. The real beauty of dating lies beyond the facade of certainty. It's in the exploration of each other's undiscovered landscapes. Dating is less about finding the perfect path and more about enjoying the journey, with all its ambiguity and wonder. Effective communication. The cafe was buzzing with life as I sat across from Jason, attempting to decipher the complex tapestry of his thoughts through his subtle facial expressions. His eyes darted to the left, a slight grin playing on his lips as he stirred his coffee. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the importance of clarity and openness in communication. It was no longer just about what I wanted to say. It was about how to say it so that it actually reached him. You know, I began with a careful smile. Sometimes it's like we're speaking different languages. I'm wondering how we can bridge that gap a little better. He looked up, genuinely intrigued, and I felt a flicker of connection. Finding common ground wasn't just for conversations with potential partners. It was the bedrock on which relationships flourished or withered. Effective communication, I had learned, was an art form, and like any art, it demanded practice and patience. I remember one of the first lessons I picked up: listening more than speaking. It's easy to think you know what you're going to say next, but truly hearing the other person changes the dynamic completely. What do you think? I asked, hoping to draw him into this dialogue, making it a two-way street. Jason leaned back, considering my words, and then met my gaze with a sincerity that made my heart quicken. I guess I haven't been great at this either. Sometimes I feel like I'm not understood, and then I just shut down. His candid admission brought a new level of trust between us. It was a small triumph, but a significant one. Perhaps one of the most underrated tools in effective communication is asking open-ended questions. They don't just solicit a yes or no answer, but invite the other person to open up, to share more of their world. What makes you feel understood? I ventured, genuinely curious. It wasn't about prying, but about providing a space for honesty and authenticity. His eyes softened, and he took a thoughtful pause before speaking. When someone mirrors back what I say, it shows they're really listening. And finding common interests, knowing that we have shared experiences or hobbies, makes me feel connected. This revelation offered a roadmap, one that encouraged me to not just speak, but to engage, to mirror, and to share more of myself. We continued to talk, finding new layers to uncover and explore. I noticed how my confidence grew the more I practiced these techniques. Establishing eye contact, maintaining an open posture, and nodding affirmatively were all nonverbal cues that broke down barriers silently but effectively. Over time, these nuances became second nature, transforming everyday interactions into meaningful exchanges. That day at the cafe marked a turning point, not just in understanding Jason, but in appreciating the profound impact of effective communication. It became clear that with every conversation, there lies an opportunity to connect, to understand, and most importantly, to be understood. The lessons I learned weren't confined to that small table in a busy cafe. They became part of my every encounter, changing the way I approached new relationships forever. Managing expectations. The anticipation was the hardest part. Perhaps it was the nightly ventures through dating apps, or the whispers of friends and their seemingly perfect relationships, but finding the balance between excitement and realism had proven to be an unyielding challenge. Each swipe, each message exchange, came with a flickering hope, a candle too often blown out by the harsh winds of unmet expectations. I remember the night clearly. A first date with Aaron, a man whose profile boasted humor, adventure, and a penchant for deep conversations. My heart was in a hurricane of anticipation. Would this be the connection I longed for, the spark that would ignite a rare and lasting intimacy? As I smoothed down my dress and took a final look in the mirror, a tinge of worry crept in. Was this all too much to place on one evening, on one person? The restaurant was a cozy Italian bistro lit by the soft glow of candlelight. As Aaron and I shared stories over plates of pasta, I could feel the weight of my own expectations pressing down. Each time our eyes met, I searched for signs that he could be the one to match my hopes. But with each passing minute, I realized my desires were casting a shadow over the present moment, clouding the genuine conversation taking place. Aaron was engaging, no doubt, but was he living up to the image I had created in my mind? When he excused himself to take a call, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. It was then that the internal dialogue began. What was I truly expecting from tonight? Perfection? Instant connection? It hit me that the pedestal I had placed Aaron on wasn't fair, not to him, and certainly not to myself. Seeking a partner who could perfectly fit every checkbox was as unrealistic as the profiles on those dating apps that promised a utopian romance. By the time Aaron returned, I had decided to shift my focus. Instead of seeking an exact match to my ideals, I chose to appreciate the moment as it was. We laughed about silly things, shared vulnerabilities, and the evening took on a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. Managing my expectations didn't mean giving up on my desires for a meaningful relationship, but rather reining them in just enough to leave room for possibility. A date wasn't about finding the one immediately. It was about exploring and enjoying the journey of connection, one conversation at a time. When the night drew to a close, we walked along the moonlit street, talking about everything and nothing. As I stood on my toes to hug him goodbye, I felt a sense of contentment. There was no overwhelming certainty about the future, but a peaceful acceptance of the present. Maybe we would see each other again, maybe we wouldn't, but the pressure was gone. And with it, I found a newfound clarity that allowed space for genuine admiration and potential growth. Your desires and dreams deserve validation, but they must coexist with the reality of another person's existence. Balancing your expectations isn't about lowering your standards, but managing them in such a way that you can still find joy and fulfillment in the shared moments, without the burden of insatiable ideals. And as I learned that night, sometimes the most disarming connections emerge not from a meticulously detailed plan, but from the simple act of being present. Chapter 5: The Art of Flirting. Body language. The coffee shop buzzed softly with the hum of conversations, clinking cups, and the occasional hiss of an espresso machine. Sitting across from Ava, I noticed the way her pupils dilated whenever she laughed at my jokes, and how her body angled slightly toward me, almost subconsciously. It struck me that body language spoke more honestly than words ever could. Each movement was a subtle dialogue, a tapestry of unspoken emotion. I was determined to understand it, to decode every gesture she made. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, but I found myself watching her every move. Ava's hands danced as she talked, punctuating her sentences with gentle flourishes. When she leaned in closer to emphasize a point, her lips curving into a soft smile, I knew she was genuinely interested. Her feet, I noticed, were pointing toward me, not a detail most would catch, but an important one nonetheless. It was a sign of attentiveness, a silent indication that she was fully engaged. But it wasn't just Ava's signals I was reading. I became acutely aware of my own. My posture, for instance, became something of a silent narrator. I tried to mirror her movement subtly, a nod here, a lean there, creating a rhythm that felt natural and, hopefully, inviting. When she crossed her legs toward me, I adjusted my position slightly, mimicking her openness. In that mirrored dance, we were crafting a connection, an unspoken affirmation of mutual interest. The moment grew richer when our hands brushed as we both reached for the sugar at the same time. Her fingers lingered for just a second longer than necessary, and a spark seemed to flow between us. That minor contact was a revelation. It conveyed warmth, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of desire. Ava's glance downward, coupled with a quick smile, revealed a shyness that made my heart race. It was astonishing how much could be said without a single word. As the evening wore on, I realized that understanding these nonverbal cues was like learning a new language, one where the smallest detail spoke volumes. Ava's sidelong glances, the way she twirled a loose strand of hair around her finger, and her slight forward inclinations during particularly engaging parts of our conversation all painted a vivid picture of her feelings. And when our evening came to a close, the gentle hug she offered, with her arms wrapping around me just a bit tighter than a casual embrace, left me in no doubt of the connection we had fostered. Walking home, I replayed our interactions in my mind, savoring each fleeting touch and meaningful look. It was clear to me now, our bodies truly do speak louder than words. And in this newfound understanding, I felt a sense of confidence, ready to navigate the uncharted waters of dating with a heightened awareness. Because sometimes, the heart sees what is invisible to the eye, and the body speaks what the mouth cannot. Playful banter. It all started at the local coffee shop, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the subtle notes of vanilla in the air. I noticed him first, a tall figure in a leather jacket, smiling confidently as if he owned the room. I couldn't help but be intrigued. With my latte in hand, I walked over to a vacant table nearby. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt a surge of excitement. I decided to break the ice with a light-hearted comment. "Nice jacket. Did you raid Indiana Jones's closet for that?" I quipped, a playful smile dancing on my lips. He chuckled, clearly appreciating the humor. "Oh, absolutely," he replied, his eyes sparkling. "But I had to leave the whip behind. Wouldn't want to scare off any coffee enthusiasts." His reply was smooth, and it was clear he was no stranger to playful banter. An instant connection sparked. We fell into an easy rhythm, exchanging jests and playful teases as if we had known each other for years. Each comment was met with laughter or a clever retort, and before long, we had drawn the attention of a few nearby patrons. It was infectious, the light-heartedness we shared, and it felt like we were in our own world. So, I ventured, leaning forward slightly, "What brings Indiana Jones to this neck of the woods?" I realized I was genuinely curious. Was it fate that had drawn us together in this cozy corner of the world? "Ah, the sacred quest for the perfect coffee," he replied, his tone mock serious. "Legend has it, it's hidden somewhere in this very cafe." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, and I found myself leaning in, captivated by his playful storytelling. This light-hearted exchange, filled with wit and humor, built an effortless rapport between us. It was as though playful banter was a language we both spoke fluently, creating an unspoken bond that made the interaction feel alive and dynamic. As the conversation continued, I felt a growing tension, a charged undercurrent of unspoken attraction. Would this playful banter lead to something more? Time seemed to stand still, each clever remark and shared laugh drawing us closer. He glanced at his watch, a flicker of reluctance crossing his face. "Well," he began, his tone teasing but regretful, "it looks like my quest for legendary coffee must continue elsewhere. But perhaps," he added, his eyes locking onto mine, "we could join forces in this noble pursuit sometime?" Expressing interest. There was a time when I believed that showing interest in someone was as simple as sending a text or perhaps a witty comment. As I navigated the world of dating, I quickly learned that expressing genuine interest required more than surface-level actions. It demanded authenticity and understanding. I remember one evening, sitting across from someone whose smile had captivated me from the moment we met. Our conversation danced through topics lighthearted and deep, but my mind was focused on how to show her that I was genuinely interested, without crossing a line. It's a delicate balance, this act of showing attraction. I started by asking questions that went beyond the mundane. Rather than inquiring about her job or hobbies, I found myself deeply curious about what makes her eyes light up when she speaks, the stories behind the soft chuckle she sometimes gave, and the nuances in her answers. "What was the best part of your week?" I asked, leaning in slightly. As she began to share, I made a conscious effort to listen actively, nodding and smiling, genuinely engaging with her words. Through our interaction, body language played a silent but pivotal role. I mirrored her posture subtly, not in a way that felt rehearsed, but enough to create a comfortable, familiar rhythm between us. When she laughed, I allowed myself to join in, leaning closer, letting her feel that her happiness was infectious. These small gestures, I discovered, went a long way in forming a connection that felt both real and respectful. Then came the part that always filled me with a slight sense of dread, expressing my feelings without overwhelming her. As the evening progressed, I caught her gaze and decided it was time to lay a card on the table. "I've really enjoyed this evening," I said, my voice sincere. "Spending time with you feels effortless and genuinely pleasant." I watched her reaction carefully. Her smile widened, and I felt a sense of relief. I had not come on too strong, yet I had communicated my attraction. This gentle approach of expressing interest, I realized, is an exercise in patience and sensitivity. It's about reading the room, picking up on cues, and understanding that sometimes, holding back is just as important as reaching out. The art of showing attraction and affection is not about grand gestures or declarations, but rather about a series of thoughtful, considerate actions that pave the way for mutual understanding and connection. As we parted ways that night, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had managed to show my interest without crossing any boundaries, leaving room for her to reciprocate at her own pace. The key, I understood, lay in being genuine, patient, and respectful, a balance that, when struck correctly, can lead to something truly wonderful. Chapter 6: Love Languages. Discovering your love language. It all began on a quiet Sunday afternoon, when I decided to delve into the fascinating world of love languages. I had heard snippets about it, casual conversations among friends, and fleeting mentions in articles. But this time, I wanted to understand it deeply, not just for intellectual curiosity, but because, lately, something had felt off in my relationship with Emily. We seemed to be missing each other's signals and unspoken needs. Sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, I opened the book on love languages. It felt like embarking on an adventure, navigating uncharted territories of the heart. Words like words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch danced on the pages, each promising a new way to understand love. The more I read, the more I reflected on my interactions with Emily. I remembered the times she seemed happiest and when she seemed distant. It struck me, she always lit up when I did small things for her, like making breakfast or helping with her workload. Acts of service, I noted. It was her love language, clear as day. But what about me? I closed my eyes, let my mind wander through our shared memories. Moments of pure joy appeared, our late-night conversations, her spontaneous words of encouragement, and the way she listened intently when I shared my dreams. Words of affirmation, it clicked. That was my love language, how I felt most valued and loved. Armed with this revelation, I decided it was time for a meaningful conversation with Emily. That evening, we sat at our favorite spot in the park, the soft rustle of leaves accompanying our words. I shared my discoveries with her, hesitations and all. She listened, her eyes softening with understanding. When she spoke, it felt as if we were both unlocking doors to our hearts that had been closed for too long. "I always knew you felt loved when I praised you," she said, "but I didn't realize how important it was. And when you do those little things for me, it feels like you understand me so well. It's like your actions speak louder than words." The air around us seemed to hum with a newfound connection. We promised to be more attuned to each other's love languages, to make an effort to communicate love in the way the other needed most. It wasn't just about grand gestures, but small, daily acts of love that spoke volumes. As we walked back home, hand in hand, the tension that had once clouded our relationship seemed to lift. We had found a new way to enrich our love, not through grand changes, but by understanding and nurturing the unique ways we each experienced love. The knowledge of our love languages had become a map, guiding us through the intricate landscape of our hearts, promising deeper intimacy and joy. Later that night, as I lay in bed, Emily's gentle breathing next to me, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship, one filled with promise and a deeper understanding of each other's hearts. Understanding your partner's love language. It was one of those balmy summer evenings when everything felt just right. The stars twinkled above us, and the gentle hum of crickets set a serene background melody. We had just finished a delightful dinner at our favorite little bistro, and honestly, I thought the night couldn't possibly get any better. But then, she brought up something I'd read about but never truly comprehended: love languages. "Do you know what my love language is?" she asked, looking deeply into my eyes, a hint of vulnerability traced in her voice. I was momentarily taken aback, the concept suddenly becoming more real, more essential than I had ever considered. Sure, I had heard about it in passing conversations and seen references in countless articles, but I had never thought to ask her about it directly. As sunlight dapples through leaves in the morning, realization dawned on me. This was my moment to dive deeper, to truly understand her in a way I hadn't before. She began to explain. There are 5 love languages, each representing a different way people express and experience love. Words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. Each person has a primary love language that fills their emotional tank the most. As she spoke, I felt myself getting more engrossed in her words, realizing how vital this knowledge was if I wanted our relationship to bloom further. I listened intently as she described how simple words of affirmation, like "I appreciate you" or "you mean the world to me," made her feel valued and cherished. She shared how every "thank you" and "I love you" lifted her spirits and made her days brighter. I began to see clearer now. You see, these expressions weren't just casual remarks. They were the very essence of her emotional nourishment. The conversation took a more intricate turn when she broached the second language, acts of service. "It's like when you made me breakfast the other day," she said, tuning her voice to reflect the memory. Those gestures speak volumes to me. They're actions that say you care, that you're willing to put in the effort to make my life easier. I recalled all those times I had performed little chores, never fully realizing their profound impact. It wasn't just a clean kitchen. It was an unspoken declaration of love. We then ventured into the realm of receiving gifts. "It's not about the price tag," she clarified, perhaps reading my mind. "It's about the thought behind the gift. A flower you picked on your way home or a small token that shows you were thinking about me." This was her way of feeling remembered, essential, always on my mind. Her face genuinely lit up when she discussed quality time. It's those moments when we're fully present with each other, without distractions. Sharing experiences, conversations that go beyond the surface level, they're invaluable to me. She made me realize that it wasn't just about spending time together, but about truly being there for each other, mind and soul. Lastly, she spoke about physical touch. A simple hug, holding hands, or a gentle kiss on the forehead, it's those affectionate touches that make me feel close to you, more intimate. Each touch was a silent lullaby, a wordless poem speaking of tenderness and unity. As the night breeze grew cooler, the depth of our conversation provided warmth. My heart swelled with newfound understanding, ready to embrace and honor her love language. Each love language wasn't just a concept in a book anymore. It was her, it was us. The uncharted territory of truly knowing how to nurture our love was both thrilling and a bit daunting, like standing on the edge of a vast, radiant ocean, ready to dive in. I looked at her, my resolve growing stronger, knowing that every step we took in understanding each other would only bring us closer. Expressing love effectively. This morning, as I sat in my favorite cafe, a sudden realization hit me. Expressing love is as much an art as it is an emotional endeavor. Love isn't a one-size-fits-all feeling. It requires creativity, thought, and, most importantly, a genuine effort. For a long time, I navigated the murky waters of relationships with grandiose gestures, believing they were the key to a partner's heart. But over time, I learned that the most impactful expressions of love often come from the simplest acts. I remember a particular moment with Emily, where I decided to step away from the traditional and explore more personal expressions of love. Instead of buying an expensive gift, I wrote her a letter. Not just any letter, but one that detailed the reasons I loved her, the way she scrunched her nose when she laughed, the way she hummed to herself when she thought no one was listening. When I handed it to her, the look on her face was unlike any I had seen before. It was as though I had given her the world. From that moment, I understood the power of words and how they, when spoken from the heart, could mean more than material offerings. There was also a time when I decided to speak the unspoken language of touch. I paid close attention to how Emily would lean into me when she was feeling vulnerable, or how she intertwined her fingers with mine during an exciting movie scene. One evening, instead of just giving her a kiss goodnight, I softly traced little circles on her back as she drifted to sleep. That simple act, communicating my love through gentle touches, made her feel safe and cherished in a way words never could. It was a transformative experience, teaching me that love is often shown, not told. But perhaps the most striking lesson came when I started listening. Genuinely listening to her dreams, fears, and stories without the need to interject with solutions or opinions. Just being there, a quiet presence she could rely on. One evening, she shared a fear she had about her future, something she had never voiced out loud. I didn't try to fix it, I just listened. Later, she told me that my silent support was one of the greatest displays of love she had ever felt. It wasn't grand or elaborate, but it was sincere and meaningful. As I paid my bill and left the cafe, I felt more confident in my understanding of love. Not because I found a universal answer, but because I discovered that the most effective expressions of love are those that feel authentic to you and the person you care for. They are tailored, personal, and most importantly, come from a place of genuine emotion. Whether you're expressing through words, a gentle touch, or silent support, it's the sincerity that leaves a lasting impact. Chapter 7. The Power of Vulnerability. Embracing authenticity. For years, I had approached dating as though it were a game I had to win. I rehearsed lines, dressed in ways that I thought would impress, and tried to cultivate an image that was, at best, a fraction of my true self. But as I sat across from Anna, I felt a sudden urge to shed the mask I had been wearing for so long. This was a first date, a fresh start, and maybe, just maybe, an opportunity to do things right. We were in a small, dimly lit cafe that smelled of fresh coffee and baked goods. She looked relaxed and comfortable, wearing a simple dress and minimal makeup. There was an air of unpretentiousness about her that drew me in. I realized that for once, I wanted to be real, to show her who I really was, with no pretenses. I used to think dating was like an audition, I admitted, surprising even myself. Trying to impress the other person, putting on a show. Anna's eyes sparkled with interest. And now? And now, I want to do something different. I want to show you the real me, I said, feeling the tension in my chest ease as the words tumbled out. Her smile widened. That's refreshing. Too many people get caught up in trying to be perfect. As the conversation flowed, I talked about my love of old books, my irrational fear of heights, and my dream of traveling the world with just a backpack. With every word, I felt more like myself, and less like an actor playing a role. Anna reciprocated, sharing her quirks, dreams, and fears. The connection between us deepened with each disclosed vulnerability. When the date ended, I walked her to her car, feeling lighter and more hopeful than I had in years. "This was nice," I said, genuinely. "I'd like to do it again sometime." Anna nodded, her eyes reflecting the sincerity in her voice. "I would too. It's rare to meet someone who's willing to be real." As I watched her drive away, I knew that I had taken the first step toward something meaningful. It wasn't just about finding a partner, it was about finding a connection built on authenticity. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. Building emotional intimacy. I still remember the first time I felt a genuine emotional connection with someone. It was as if I had unlocked a part of myself that had long been sealed. Deepening an emotional connection with a partner transforms a relationship, filling it with trust, vulnerability, and unparalleled closeness. Trust is the cornerstone of any deep emotional bond. This isn't something that happens overnight. Trust is built through actions, consistency, and being there for each other in significant ways. It requires showing up and following through on promises, proving that you can be relied upon. It's about communicating openly and being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I learned that every moment of honesty, even in the smallest matters, layered our foundation of trust, making it stronger day by day. Vulnerability came next, and this was a tough one. Allowing myself to be vulnerable meant exposing parts of me I often kept hidden, parts one feared might scare others away. I had to show my fears, my dreams, my insecurities, and my past wounds. I had to admit when I didn't know what I was doing and share how deeply I could feel pain and love simultaneously. The first time I truly let my guard down, it was terrifying, but the response I received in return, a look of understanding and acceptance, made every moment of fear worth it. Vulnerability is the gateway to genuine connections. As the walls came down, closeness permeated our relationship. We began to understand each other in ways that went beyond mere words. It was in the small gestures, the inside jokes, the ability to complete each other's sentences, and the comfort of knowing someone was there with unwavering support. It's the kind of closeness that makes you feel seen and loved for exactly who you are. When you foster trust, embrace vulnerability, and allow closeness to flourish, you build a bond that weathers storms and celebrates sunny days with equal grace. Emotional intimacy doesn't just enhance a relationship, it transforms it into something resilient and beautiful. I discovered that the more I invested in these layers, the richer and more fulfilling our connection became. But building this kind of intimacy also demands constant effort and genuine desire from both partners. There were days when I stumbled, moments when fear crept in, and instances where our trust was tested. Nonetheless, each challenge faced together only strengthened our bond. Navigating these waters alongside each other created an intimacy that felt almost magical. The journey was intense and demanding, yet immensely rewarding. And as you read this, perhaps your own experiences echo mine, or maybe you are at the cusp of embarking on this journey of emotional intimacy. Trust, vulnerability, and closeness are not mere steps, they are the life force of a thriving relationship. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the depth of our connections defines the quality of our lives. Overcoming fear of rejection. It started with a glance in the mirror. Just a casual look, but one that somehow managed to end in that cold, familiar grip of self-doubt. Was the suit too much? Was the hair perfect, or did it scream, trying too hard? The questions came barreling in, one after another, until they consumed my thoughts entirely. What if she didn't like the restaurant? What if I stuttered, or worse, ran out of things to say? The fear of rejection had an insidious way of creeping into every nook and cranny of my mind. By the time I left my apartment, my confidence was hanging on by a thread. The streets were busy, and the world was moving, but all I felt was the heaviness in my chest. Anxiety clung to me like an unwelcome companion. I needed a strategy, something to cling on to push through this crippling fear. At that moment, I remembered an article I had read about building resilience. It mentioned the importance of reframing, seeing setbacks not as rejections but as redirections. During the cab ride to the restaurant, I practiced this mental shift. Instead of imagining disastrous outcomes, I visualized positive scenarios. I pictured laughter, connection, a spark of something new. More importantly, I kept reminding myself that my worth wasn't up for debate tonight. Regardless of how the evening went, I would remain who I was, a person deserving of respect and kindness, even if this date didn't see it. Stepping out of the cab, I took a deep breath. The restaurant's warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, inviting and disarming at the same time. As I walked in, the hostess greeted me with a smile, and my eyes scanned the room for her. Then, I saw her, sitting by the window, lost in thought. She looked up and met my gaze, breaking into a smile that sent a wave of warmth through me. The conversation flowed easier than I had anticipated. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our most embarrassing moments. Each laugh she shared felt like a small victory against my nagging fears. As the evening progressed, my confidence began to rebuild itself, brick by brick. I realized that the fear of rejection had been a mirage, a distorted reflection of my insecurities. By the time we said our goodbyes, I felt lighter, more resilient. Whether we would see each other again or not seemed less important than the lesson I had learned. The walls of fear that once seemed insurmountable had cracks now, wide enough for hope and confidence to seep through. I walked home with a smile, my heart as clear as the evening sky. For the first time in a long while, facing potential setbacks in dating didn't seem like a looming threat but an adventure waiting to be embraced. Chapter 8: Dating Etiquette. Dining Etiquette. The flickering candlelight danced in her eyes, making the moment something almost beyond mere words or actions. It was more than just a dinner. It was a silent conversation punctuated by every bite, every delicate sip of wine. I had read somewhere that mastering dining etiquette could transform an ordinary meal into an extraordinary experience. Tonight, sitting across from her, I understood what that truly meant. We were at a quaint Italian restaurant, the kind with checkered tablecloths and an ambience thick with nostalgia. As the waiter brought the menu, I remembered the basics. Hold it upright and avoid leaning over to read. It sounds minor, but these details matter. I stole a glance at her, and the way she glanced back over the rim of her menu told me she noticed. Conversations flowed like the Chianti we had ordered. I kept my elbows off the table, a simple rule yet often overlooked. It made my gestures more fluid, my presence more appealing. She mentioned her recent trip to Europe, and I leaned forward slightly, showing interest without crossing into her personal space. It allowed our connection to stay palpable, yet respectful. When the bread basket arrived, I resisted the urge to reach for it immediately. One piece at a time, breaking it into smaller portions, placing butter on each bite rather than slathering it all at once. I saw the faint curve of a smile on her lips, perhaps acknowledging the subtle intention behind my actions. It's funny how etiquette, often seen as rigid rules, can become a language of care. The main course arrived, a tantalizing spread of pasta and grilled vegetables. I picked up my fork and knife, holding them in a relaxed yet firm grip, forefinger on the fork's handle, thumb next to it, not over. I cut small, manageable pieces, allowing me to converse without food in my mouth or awkward pauses. Our dialogue didn't just continue, it thrived amidst the gentle clinks of cutlery. By the time dessert was suggested, the tension had eased into something warm and comfortable. We shared a tiramisu, 2 spoons, and a lot of laughter. When the check came, I didn't rush to grab it. Instead, I maintained eye contact and proposed we split it, making it a question rather than a statement. It exhibited respect for her autonomy and subtly conveyed that this was an equal partnership in more ways than one. As we walked out into the cool evening air, I realized that the evening had been more than just about following rules. It was about weaving those guidelines into the fabric of our interaction, making the dining experience a backdrop to a burgeoning connection. And in that moment, it felt like perhaps, just perhaps, the night was leading to something more significant. Texting and calling etiquette. Texting and calling in today's dating scene can feel like navigating a labyrinth. 1 minute you're riding high on cloud 9 after a fantastic date, and the next, you're staring at your phone, agonizing over how to strike the perfect balance. Believe me, I've been there. When Scott's name lit up my screen after our first date, my heart did a little flip. But with excitement comes the delicate dance of when to reply, how much to say, and how to keep things flowing smoothly. The first thing I learned is that timing is everything. Waiting 3 hours to text back because you don't want to seem too eager? That's a rookie move. Similarly, responding within seconds can make you seem overly keen. I struck a balance by giving myself a 10-minute window to draft my responses. This gave me enough time to think about what I was saying without coming off as disinterested or overly eager. When Scott sent a witty, "Lunch was great. How about dinner next time?" I took a breath, crafted a light-hearted yet genuine response, and hit send. Knowing when to call versus text is another unspoken rule. Texting is great for quick, casual communication. It's the place for inside jokes, sharing your favorite songs, or planning impromptu meetups. Calls, on the other hand, are more intimate. They allow you to pick up on nuances and chemistry that texts can't convey. A phone call can work wonders for building a deeper connection, but it also comes with a need for sensitivity. Not everyone wants to chit-chat for an hour after a long day at work. Scott called me one evening, his voice warm and relaxed. We talked effortlessly for nearly half an hour. But I made sure to gauge his interest and keep the conversation engaging without monopolizing his time. There's also the concept of giving space. Constant communication can be thrilling at first, but it can quickly become overwhelming if you're not careful. It's important to remember that giving your partner space doesn't mean neglecting them. It means showing respect for their time and individuality. I noticed that on weekends, Scott would take longer to respond. Instead of feeling hurt or clingy, I used that time to focus on my interests and friends. Interestingly, this made our interactions richer because we both had our own experiences to bring to the table when we reconnected. Finding the balance between staying in touch and giving space is an art. One evening, after a busy day at work, I found myself missing Scott's messages. I decided to send him a sweet but brief note. "Hope your day's going well. Can't wait to hear about it later." It was just enough to show I was thinking about him without demanding immediate attention. He responded later that night, appreciative and enthusiastic about sharing his day. It was a reminder that sometimes, less is more. We all know that feeling when the dynamic shifts slightly, the stage where every text and call feels like a critical move in a game. Before my last date with Scott, I had an epiphany. Authenticity trumps all these rules. Ultimately, genuine connection stems from being ourselves, rather than calculating every interaction. And just when I thought I had it all figured out, Scott sent a message that turned my world upside down. But that's a story for another time. Navigating first dates. The evening had finally arrived, and I found myself standing nervously in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my collar for the umpteenth time. It was my first date in almost a year, and I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I believe it all starts with preparation, a neat appearance, and an open mind. While selecting my clothes, I remembered the best piece of advice I had ever received. Be yourself, but try to be the best version of yourself. That meant balancing between comfort and a little bit of flair. I settled on a crisp shirt and a pair of well-fitted jeans. Not too formal, but not too casual either. A dash of cologne and I felt ready, more ready than I had felt in months. As I walked to the coffee shop where Sarah and I had agreed to meet, I mentally ran through a list of conversation starters. Asking open-ended questions always seemed to work well. What do you enjoy doing in your free time? Or have you seen any good movies lately? Questions that might evoke more than a simple yes or no. My heart raced with every step closer to our meeting spot. The cafe was charming, with soft music playing in the background and a mixture of the rich aroma of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries. I spotted Sarah almost immediately. She looked just as charming as in her photos, maybe even more so. I walked over to her, trading nervous smiles as we greeted each other. Engaging in light conversation came naturally. We discussed our favorite books, travel experiences, and quirky hobbies. I found myself genuinely interested and realized it wasn't just about what I said, but how attentively I listened to her responses. Listening, I discovered, was as if not more important than speaking. With each passing minute, our initial nervousness gave way to genuine interest. During a lull in the conversation, the waitress came over to take our dessert orders. I decided to be bold and suggested that we share a slice of cheesecake. Sarah agreed with an amused chuckle, and that small moment of camaraderie felt like a big win. As the evening progressed, we laughed more, shared stories of our childhoods, and talked about our aspirations. I stayed mindful not to dominate the conversation or delve into heavy topics. Instead, we kept it light, getting to know each other's personalities one step at a time. By the end of the night, I felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a budding excitement. Walking Sarah to her car, we talked about meeting up again. As I watched her drive away, a sense of contentment washed over me. The first date had gone better than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the pleasant conversations or the shared dessert. It was about feeling a connection that left me looking forward to more. And in that moment, I realized, first dates weren't something to be feared, but cherished as the beginning of a potential new chapter. Chapter 9. Letting Go of Past Relationships. Healing from Heartbreak. My world had crumbled around me, each piece of my heart falling into an abyss I wasn't sure I'd ever escape. The echoes of our last words haunted me, making my new reality feel like a dystopia. But, in the midst of my despair, a sliver of light appeared, the determination to heal. The journey, I knew, wouldn't be easy, but it was essential. First, I decided to disconnect. I deleted old photos, unfollowed his social media, and stashed away the mementos. Each action felt like ripping off a bandage, seemingly painful but ultimately cathartic. By removing these constant reminders, I began to clear space in my mind for new experiences and joys. It symbolized a fresh slate, and with every deleted message, I felt a tinge of relief. Interestingly, I found solace in unexpected places. Long walks through Central Park, feeling the crunch of leaves under my boots, brought a strange comfort. Nature, in its resplendent beauty and indifference, was a reminder of life's continuous flow. Each sunrise whispered of new opportunities, and the changing seasons mirrored the evolving stages of my healing. There was a peculiar irony in relying on the steady rhythms of nature, while my emotions were a tumultuous storm. Equally significant was the realization that self-love was more than an abstract concept. It was a practice, a daily commitment. I started attending yoga classes and meditated every morning. The mindfulness practices helped me reconnect with my breath, a grounding force. More than anything, these moments of stillness were revelations, allowing me to detach from the agony and view my heartbreak as a transient phase. Then came the rediscovery of passions that I had left by the wayside during our relationship. Reading, once my solace, became a nightly ritual. Traveling solo, although intimidating at first, was an adventure that reminded me of my own company's richness. With each new destination, I found fragments of myself scattered across the globe, unearthing buried dreams and long-forgotten desires. Most importantly, I built a support network. I leaned on friends, sharing my heartache over cups of coffee and laughter-filled evenings. They, in turn, shared their stories, turning our conversations into healing tapestries. Collective wisdom became a balm, and I realized I wasn't isolated in my suffering. By seeking therapy, I also gained a professional perspective. My therapist's insights helped me navigate the labyrinth of emotions, offering strategies to cope and grow. Resilience doesn't manifest overnight, but through this multifaceted approach, I felt my heartstrings slowly weaving back together. It wasn't just about surviving the heartbreak, but thriving despite it. As I embraced these constructive methods to move forward, the gaping wound transformed into a scar, a testament to my journey, not a definition of my future. Then, one evening, as the city lights flickered below from my apartment window, I felt something shift within me. I realized I was ready to face the world anew, not with the absence of pain, but with a newfound strength. The end of one chapter, painstakingly etched with tears and self-discovery, was merely the precursor to a more promising narrative. Moving on gracefully. As I stood on the edge of the pier, the ocean breeze tousling my hair, I couldn't help but let my thoughts drift back to mornings spent with Alex. The warm scent of coffee, his laughter echoing through the kitchen, it all seemed like a dream now. We had built our relationship on shared memories and whispered promises, but like tides erode the shore, our bond had slowly been worn away by misunderstanding and unmet expectations. Accepting the end of something that once brought immense joy can feel like an unbearable task. For days, I wrestled with my own sense of failure, wondering what more I could have done to save us. I realized, however, that sometimes love isn't about holding on, but knowing when to let go with dignity. Respecting myself meant recognizing that clinging to a relationship that no longer served either of us would only lead to further pain. In the aftermath of our separation, my self-respect was my anchor. Instead of succumbing to bitterness or blame, I chose to focus on the lessons I had learned. Alex taught me the value of compromise, the beauty in vulnerability, and the importance of maintaining individuality even in togetherness. Each reflection helped me piece together a more profound understanding of love, one that would guide me in future relationships. One of the most challenging aspects was confronting social pressures. It felt as if every conversation about my newfound singleness was a test, one where I had to demonstrate strength and grace without faltering. Friends meant well, offering both sympathy and advice, but it was my own resilience that truly mattered. I discovered that expressing my boundaries clearly and kindly allowed me to navigate these interactions with poise. During this time, I found solace in small rituals. Morning jogs became a way to clear my mind, letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out lingering doubts. Journaling allowed me to untangle my emotions, transforming chaos into clarity. It wasn't just about moving on from Alex, it was about reconnecting with myself, rediscovering passions and pursuits that had been sidelined. Our final conversation was an exercise in grace. With a calmness that surprised even me, I thanked Alex for the moments we had shared, acknowledged the pain of our parting, and wished him well. There were no accusations or regrets, just an acceptance of our time together and an understanding that it had come to a natural end. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of closure. Standing on the edge of the pier, I took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill my lungs. I knew the journey of healing wasn't over, but I was on my way. I would carry forward the strength I had found, the lessons I had learned, and the hope that, someday, I would open my heart to love again, this time with even greater intention and grace. The path to moving on lies not in forgetting the past, but in embracing it with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit ready to welcome new beginnings. Embracing self-love. I remember the excitement and the anxiety each time I prepped for a date. The racing thoughts about how I looked, what I would say, and whether my quirks would be charming or off-putting. But amidst the flurry of external details, I neglected the most crucial element of the entire experience: my own self-love. It wasn't an overnight transformation. My revelation came through a series of relationships and dates that left me feeling depleted rather than fulfilled. I realized that I was seeking validation and love from others before giving it to myself, and this was impacting the way I connected with potential partners. I decided it was time for a change. I needed to shift the focus inward. Prioritizing self-love doesn't mean being selfish or self-centered. It's about understanding your worth, knowing you're deserving of respect, and recognizing the importance of setting boundaries. I started small, taking myself on solo dates, indulging in my hobbies, and setting aside me time to reflect and recharge. Each act, no matter how small, was like building a fortress of self-worth. As my self-love grew, so did my authenticity. I found that I was no longer trying to mold myself into someone else's ideal. Instead, I was presenting my true self to the world. This shift led to more genuine connections. People could sense my confidence and authenticity, and those who were attracted to these qualities tended to be more aligned with my values and aspirations. What I discovered was fascinating. Practicing self-love introduced a layer of resilience and clarity in my dating life. It became easier to walk away from situations and individuals that didn't serve my emotional well-being, fostering a deeper connection with those who truly respected and valued me. The fear of not being enough diminished as I realized that being true to myself was more important than fitting into someone else's expectations. But the journey of self-love is ongoing and requires constant nurturing. There are days when doubts creep in, when societal pressures challenge my self-worth, but I remind myself of the importance of loving who I am at my core. I've discovered that the relationship I have with myself sets the tone for every other relationship in my life. As you embark on your own dating journey, remember to prioritize self-love. It's the foundation upon which healthy, fulfilling relationships are built. When you love and honor yourself, you attract those who will do the same. And in those moments of vulnerability, when it feels like the world is waging a war against your heart, you'll find strength in the love you've cultivated within. Chapter 10. The Joy of Dating Yourself. Self-discovery and self-care. The rain was tapping gently on my window, creating a serene melody as I sat in my favorite chair, wrapped in a cozy blanket. It was one of those rare afternoons when I had nothing on my schedule, and I decided to dedicate this time to myself. It had been a long journey, but I was finally learning the art of self-discovery and self-care. These practices had not only transformed my everyday life, but also enhanced my experiences in the dating world. I remember the first time I truly pondered who I was outside of the roles I played in my relationships. It hit me during a particularly turbulent breakup. I realized that I had lost touch with my own interests, my own passions. That's when I made a vow to myself, to explore my identity beyond the confines of a partnership. One of the first steps in this journey was journaling. I started writing every morning, a ritual that became as essential as my cup of coffee. In those pages, I poured out my thoughts, my dreams, my insecurities. The act of writing helped me navigate my internal landscape, untangling emotions and aspirations I hadn't been conscious of. It was like meeting a new friend, myself, one who was eager to grow and flourish. The next transformation came through mindfulness. I began meditating daily, an exercise that initially felt like a chore but soon became a refuge. Sitting in silence, focusing on my breath, allowed me to tune into my inner world with unprecedented clarity. This practice gave me a profound sense of peace and grounding, enabling me to approach life and dating with a calm confidence. Then there was self-care, the pampering of the body and soul. I curated a routine that involved everything from skincare rituals to yoga sessions. Each act of self-care was a reminder that I deserved love and attention, independent of anyone else's validation. This sense of worthiness radiated outward, making my interactions with potential partners more authentic and fulfilling. Interestingly, as I delved deeper into self-discovery and self-care, I found that it positively impacted my dating life. I no longer approached dates with a sense of desperation or a need to impress. Instead, I came as my true self, confident and content. This change was magnetic. The conversations were deeper, the connections more genuine. Potential partners noticed and appreciated this authenticity, leading to more meaningful experiences. One particularly memorable date was with Alex, a person who resonated with my newfound outlook on life. Over dinner, we shared our journeys of self-discovery, our struggles, and our triumphs. It was refreshing to meet someone who valued personal growth as much as I did. As we talked late into the evening, I realized how powerful these practices had been in shaping the quality of my connections. Reflecting on my journey thus far, I could see how indispensable self-discovery and self-care had become. They were not just tools for personal growth, but also for enriching my relationships. The more I discovered and cared for myself, the more I had to offer to those around me. And in every date, every conversation, this authenticity shone through, creating a ripple effect of positive experiences. As I closed my journal and looked out at the rain-soaked city, a sense of contentment washed over me. I was no longer searching for validation or losing myself in the process of loving someone else. Instead, I was finding joy in the journey of becoming my best self, a journey that enhanced every aspect of my life, especially dating. Little did I know, this path was about to lead me to an unexpected twist, one that would test everything I had learned about self-love and authenticity. Pursuing personal passions. When I first met Rachel, I was immediately drawn to her infectious enthusiasm for the little things in life. There was something captivating about the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her pottery classes. It struck me then how important it was to maintain our personal passions, no matter how trivial they might seem to the outside world. Before Rachel, my time was swallowed by work and routine. As a software developer, the lines between my professional and personal life had blurred to the point of non-existence. But Rachel had this extraordinary ability to compartmentalize her time, dedicating specific hours to nurture what she loved. She had her pottery, and I had my guitar, which had been gathering dust in the corner of my apartment for years. One evening, as we lounged on her couch, Rachel looked at me with genuine curiosity. "What makes you tick, Alex? What could you spend hours doing without realizing the time has flown by?" Her question lingered in the air, more profound than any career ambition chat or life goal discussion I'd had in recent memory. Rachel's insight made it clear that our passions were not just hobbies, they were lifelines that grounded us and, in turn, enriched our relationship. Encouraged by her, I dusted off my guitar and began practicing again. Initially, my fingers ached, and the chords sounded rusty, but there was a joy in rediscovering a part of myself that had been buried under layers of daily grind. Rachel would often sit beside me, shaping clay on her wheel, her presence a silent encouragement. Our evenings transformed into a symphony of sorts, splashes of paint, the hum of the pottery wheel, and strumming guitar strings blending together. We didn't need words to appreciate these moments. It was an unspoken understanding that we were nourishing not only our individual selves, but also laying down the bricks of a stronger, more balanced relationship. It wasn't always seamless. There were nights when deadlines loomed, and our creative pursuits took a back seat. But those moments only served to underline the importance of returning to our passions, like sailors finding their way back to a lighthouse. The individuality we preserved became our sanctuary, a place where we could recharge and come back to each other with fuller hearts. It's fascinating how our pursuits introduced new dimensions to our relationship. I began to see Rachel through different lenses: an artist, a creator, someone who molded raw clay into beautiful pieces. Conversely, she saw me not just as Alex, the software geek, but as someone who could create melodies that spoke when words fell short. In nurturing our personal passions, we found deeper admiration and respect for each other. One night, as we sat in the soft glow of our living room lamp, immersed in our respective worlds, Rachel paused, her hands covered in clay. "Alex, promise me something," she said softly. "Promise me you'll never stop playing, no matter how busy life gets." I smiled, knowing the promise extended beyond just the guitar. It was a reminder to always nurture the parts of ourselves that make life richer, more colorful. We've come to realize that maintaining our individuality does not mean drifting apart, but rather fueling the essence that keeps us drawn to one another. In embracing our passions, we've discovered that we bring the best versions of ourselves into the relationship, balanced, fulfilled, and undeniably ourselves. As I played a gentle melody, I felt a familiar sense of peace wash over me. Rachel looked up from her potter's wheel and met my gaze, eyes twinkling with shared understanding. It was in these precious moments that we found the heart of our connection, proving that in pursuing our personal passions, we were, in fact, pursuing each other. Embracing independence. When I first stepped into the world of dating, I felt a thrilling wave of excitement and a gnawing sense of apprehension. It was akin to standing on the edge of a cliff, the promise of new experiences urging me to jump, the fear of losing myself making me hesitate. The concept of balancing self-reliance with partnership was not something I had fully contemplated until I found myself deep in the dynamics of my first serious relationship. It was a dance, one where I needed to find my rhythm amidst the seductive allure of intimacy and the steadfast beats of my independence. As we navigated through those initial dates, I reminisced about my single days with a mix of fondness and longing. I remembered the freedom of spending weekends however I pleased, indulging in hobbies, and dedicating time to my personal growth. It wasn't that I resented the presence of someone else in my life. Rather, it was the fear of losing those cherished moments that I held sacred. I liked who I was as an independent person, and the thought of sacrificing that essence for the sake of a relationship was unsettling. This notion crystallized during one particular evening. My partner had planned a cozy dinner date, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed some time alone, immersed in my own thoughts and pursuits. I hesitantly voiced my desire, expecting disappointment or a lack of understanding. To my surprise, she smiled and said, "It's important that we both have our space. I've been meaning to catch up on my reading anyway." In that moment, I realized that a relationship didn't have to be synonymous with losing oneself. It was possible to nurture both self-reliance and partnership. We began to instill this balance into our routine, cherishing the times we spent together, while also honoring our individual needs. Sundays became a split landscape of shared brunches and solitary afternoons. My solitary runs through the park were no longer a sliver of guilt, but an affirmation of my independence. I learned that our bond was stronger when we came together after having time apart, our conversations richer with stories of solitary adventures and personal reflections. However, the journey wasn't devoid of challenges. There were moments when the scales tipped, and one of us would feel neglected, the delicate equilibrium faltering. Communication became our ally in these moments, an honest dialogue about feelings, needs, and expectations. We made room for vulnerability, allowing ourselves to admit when the balance felt skewed and working together to restore harmony. One profound lesson emerged from this dance of independence and partnership. Celebrating each other's personal growth only deepened our connection. I found joy in witnessing her thrive in her career, pursue her passions, and carve out time for self-care. Similarly, she admired my determination to maintain a fulfilling life beyond our relationship. The concept of embracing independence, while dating, ultimately reshapes how one views partnership. It isn't about merging into a single entity, but about two complete individuals choosing to share their lives, experiences, and dreams. It is a celebration of the unique paths that lead to one another, a constant balancing act that, when done right, enriches both the relationship and the self. As I stood on that metaphorical cliff once more, I felt no hesitation. I had discovered that it was possible to leap into the depths of a loving partnership while retaining the wings of my independence, soaring higher together than we ever could alone. Chapter 11: Compatibility and Chemistry. Shared Values and Goals. From the first moment I met Emily, there was an undeniable spark between us. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and we shared a mutual attraction that seemed almost magnetic. But, beyond the chemistry, there was something deeper I hoped to discover. In my heart, I knew that for a relationship to truly prosper, it needed a solid foundation of shared values and goals. And so, one evening over dinner, I decided to broach the topic. "Tell me, what are your biggest priorities in life?" I asked, genuinely curious. Emily looked thoughtfully at her glass of wine before responding. "I value honesty above everything else," she said after a pause. "And trust. Without trust, I don't think any relationship can last." I nodded in agreement. Her words resonated deeply with me. Honesty had always been my cornerstone, both in relationships and life in general. The night continued, and as we talked more about our values, it became evident that we were on the same wavelength. Family, integrity, and personal growth were other pillars that we found common ground on. Emily's passion for volunteering matched my own, and her career ambitions mirrored the drive I had in my own professional life. Then, I shifted the conversation to our future ambitions. "What are your long-term goals?" I asked. Without hesitation, she shared her dreams of starting a family, traveling the world, and making a tangible difference in others' lives. It was as if she were articulating my own future aspirations. I felt a rush of excitement mixed with a profound sense of relief. "It's amazing how aligned our goals seem to be," I remarked. Emily smiled, her eyes glimmering with the same enthusiasm I felt. "It is," she agreed. "But I think what's more important is that we support each other in achieving them. It's one thing to have shared goals, but we also need to be each other's biggest champions." As the evening drew to a close, I realized that identifying and prioritizing our shared values and goals had established a potent foundation for our relationship. We weren't just surviving on chemistry and attraction. We were building a partnership rooted in harmony and alignment. The prospect of a future together felt not only possible, but incredibly exciting. The journey ahead, however, would require consistent effort and mutual support, something I was ready to embrace wholeheartedly. But little did I know, the road to truly understanding and living by those shared values would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. The next chapter of our relationship awaited, with challenges and opportunities that would reveal the true strength of our bond. Physical and emotional connection. The first time I felt our physical and emotional worlds intertwine, it was an unexpected jolt that left my heart racing. We were cozied up on the couch, binge-watching our favorite series, and his fingers absent-mindedly traced patterns on my arm. It was such a simple gesture, but it carried an electric charge that made me feel both comforted and excited. In that moment, I realized how vital physical touch was in deepening our emotional connection. Over time, we discovered that every touch, every kiss, every shared embrace was not merely about physical pleasure. It was about communicating love, trust, and a bond that went beyond words. When he held my hand, I could feel his unspoken promises. When I leaned into his chest, I felt a safety that words could never convey. These small moments of physical intimacy nurtured a deeper emotional bond, creating a language all our own. But it wasn't always seamless. There were days when our physical connection felt like a lifeline, even as our emotional worlds seemed out of sync. Arguments would arise, misunderstandings would linger, and distance would grow. It was in these challenging times that I realized the importance of integrating both realms. Without the emotional groundwork, physical touch could feel hollow, almost empty. One pivotal evening, as we sat across from each other after a particularly heated argument, the silence between us was palpable. I reached out, hesitantly placing my hand over his. He looked into my eyes, and I could see the walls slowly crumbling. We communicated our pain, our fears, our hopes, without uttering a single word. The physical act of holding his hand became a bridge to mending our emotional divide. It was a reminder that one without the other could never sustain us. The more we nurtured both connections, the stronger our relationship became. We learned to talk openly about our feelings, fostering emotional intimacy during our quiet conversations at dusk or our shared laughter over silly inside jokes. Simultaneously, we became more attuned to each other's need for physical affection, whether it was a spontaneous hug in the kitchen or a gentle kiss on the forehead before bed. The harmony we found in balancing our physical and emotional worlds brought a profound depth to our love. It wasn't always easy, and it required effort and vulnerability from both of us. But the rewards were undeniable. The nights we spent intertwined, sharing whispers and warmth, were infinitely richer because of the emotional trust we had built. And every heartfelt conversation was sweeter for the physical closeness that accompanied it. As I sit here now, reflecting on our journey, I'm reminded of the delicate dance that relationships are. Nurturing both physical and emotional connections isn't just important, it's essential. It's about recognizing that one feeds the other, creating a bond that is both tender and unbreakable. And in that balance, we find a love that is truly whole. Navigating differences. When I first met Dan, I was captivated by his laid-back charm and effortless humor. His smile was infectious, and our connection seemed instantaneous. However, it didn't take long for our differences to surface. He loved stand-up comedy and action-packed weekends, while I found solace in quiet mornings with a book and cherished moments spent painting. Our worlds were different, and I was acutely aware that finding a balance would be our greatest challenge. As we spent more time together, these differences began to manifest in subtle ways. We'd find ourselves in mild disagreements over small things, from dining choices to weekend activities. At first, these seemed trivial, easy to brush off. But as the honeymoon phase wore off, I began to realize the importance of navigating these differences with grace and understanding. One memorable Saturday morning, Dan proposed an impromptu adventure trip, filled with hiking and cliff diving. The very thought of it made my stomach churn, as I had always preferred serene, calmer activities. I hesitated, contemplating how to express my reluctance without diminishing his excitement. It was in that moment I realized, communication was our bridge. Dan, I began softly, I love the idea of spending the weekend together, but I'm not comfortable with such extreme activities. How about we compromise? Maybe we can hike in the morning and spend the afternoon at a cozy cafe in town. His face softened, and a warm smile crept across his lips. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're right. A mix of both sounds perfect. This small victory was a turning point in our relationship. It taught me that by respecting each other's individuality and finding common ground, we could navigate our differences gracefully. It wasn't about changing who we were, but rather about understanding and valuing the unique perspectives each of us brought to the table. As weeks turned into months, we developed strategies to handle potential conflicts. We established compromise nights where we'd take turns planning our evenings, ensuring each of us had the chance to share our interests. Dan introduced me to live comedy shows, where I learned to appreciate the artistry of humor, while I shared my love for serene beach walks and late-night stargazing. We were learning to blend our worlds without losing ourselves in the process. Respecting individuality became our golden rule. We embraced each other's passions without judgment. It wasn't always easy, but every effort was a step towards a deeper connection. The more we appreciated our differences, the more we grew as a couple. However, the true test of our commitment came during an intense argument over planning a holiday. Dan wanted a bustling city tour, while I yearned for a tranquil retreat. The disagreement escalated, tempers flared, and it felt like our differences might pull us apart. In that heated moment, I remembered our journey, our efforts to understand and respect each other. With a deep breath, I paused and said, Dan, let's not allow this to drive a wedge between us. Our relationship is more important than a vacation. Let's find a way to make this work together. The tension eased, and we sat down to calmly discuss our preferences. It was in these talks that we discovered new depths within ourselves and each other. We decided to split our vacation, spending half the time in the city and the other half in a serene countryside, blending the best of both worlds. By learning to navigate differences gracefully, we uncovered a profound truth. Relationships thrive on understanding, respect, and the willingness to meet each other halfway. It's a dance of give and take, where every step, no matter how small, strengthens the bond and enriches the journey together. Chapter 12. Redefining Gender Roles. Empowering Equality. Sitting across from Emily at our favorite little cafe, I couldn't help but notice the subtle glow of the morning sun casting a golden halo around her. She looked up from her coffee, her eyes meeting mine with a sense of assurance that made my heart skip a beat. We had been dating for just a few months, but there was a palpable change in the way we understood each other. It wasn't just chemistry. There was a deeper connection forming, one built on mutual respect and a shared sense of responsibility. I've been thinking a lot about how we make decisions, Emily started, her voice soft but firm. It's important to me that we both feel like equal partners, that we share the load whether it's about who cooks or who does the dishes. I want us to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and support each other unconditionally. My mind raced back to my previous relationships where traditional roles often dictated our actions. There was always this invisible line, a silent expectation about what a man or a woman should do. But with Emily, this was different. I wanted to be different. I nodded, taking her hand in mine, feeling a warmth spread through my chest, knowing that she felt it too. I get what you mean, I replied thoughtfully. It's not just about splitting chores or tasks, it's about valuing each other equally. I want to support your career and dreams just as much as mine. Let's say, if you need to work late, I'll handle dinner without a second thought. And if I need to travel for a few days, I know you'll have everything under control here. It's about balance, right? Emily's smile widened, her eyes twinkling with relief and hope. Exactly. And it's more than just practical stuff. It's about feeling heard and seen, sharing our feelings and making decisions together. There's no my choice or your choice, it's our choice. As we continued our conversation, I realized how much this meant to her, and, surprisingly, how much it meant to me as well. We were laying the groundwork for something real, something that defied the conventions we had both unknowingly adhered to for so long. It was like opening a new chapter in our lives, where every sentence we wrote would be filled with respect, love, and equality. Days turned into weeks, and we started practicing what we preached. We made sure to check in with each other daily, sharing our thoughts openly. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes old habits tried to sneak back in, but we faced them together. One night, after cooking dinner together, Emily turned to me, her eyes soft and sincere. This, right here, Feels good, she said quietly. Not just the routine, but knowing that we are building something solid, something equal. I pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of her words sink deep into my soul. Yes, it does, I whispered. In that moment, I felt more connected to her than ever. We were two parts of a whole, navigating life with mutual respect and shared dreams. And for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to empower equality in a relationship. Challenging stereotypes. There I was, standing at the edge of a cliff that the world calls society's expectations. On the surface, it appeared sturdy, well-trodden, but a closer look revealed cracks, faulty edges, and a quicksand of stereotypes that threatened to swallow us whole. I had always been one to play by the rules. A gentleman should always pay for dinner. He must show strength and be the protector, while a lady is expected to be nurturing, soft-spoken, and forever accommodating. But there comes a moment when you question the script handed to you, and for me, that moment began with Eliza. Eliza wasn't just any woman. She was a force of nature. Independent, intelligent, and unapologetically herself. The first time we met, she didn't wait for me to strike up a conversation. Instead, she said, "So, are you an adventurer or a routine junkie?" No small talk, no socially accepted niceties. She challenged me from the get-go, and I couldn't help but be intrigued. Over coffee dates and spontaneous hikes, we quickly realized that neither of us fit into the neat little boxes society had carved out for us. One evening, I decided to broach the subject. I began hesitantly. I don't mind if we split the bill sometimes." Eliza's eyes sparkled with mischief as she replied, "Oh, thank goodness. You have no idea how weird it feels to sit there, waiting for you to pull out your wallet. Feels like an unnecessary power play, don't you think?" And just like that, the ground beneath us shifted, but it was exhilarating rather than frightening. We started deconstructing roles we had never consciously agreed to, but had always followed. It wasn't just about the bill, it was about everything. Why was it that I had always been the one to initiate plans? Or that she had felt compelled to appear less ambitious than she actually was to avoid intimidating me? As our relationship deepened, these conversations became more frequent and more intense. We began to openly defy those societal scripts, deciding together what worked best for us. Sometimes she took the lead, organizing an entire weekend trip, complete with adventure sports that had my adrenaline pumping. Other times, I cooked while she handled the technical stuff, fixing the Wi-Fi router and setting up the new smart system for our home. The surprising part? None of this detracted from my sense of masculinity or her femininity. If anything, it accentuated our strengths and filled in the gaps where we were weak, making us an unbeatable team. Yet, every now and then, subtle disapproval would rear its head from friends and even family. They would question, sometimes overtly and sometimes with raised eyebrows, why she was the one driving or why I was the one planning dates. One evening after a particularly strenuous debate with a friend who couldn't understand our dynamic, we found ourselves sitting on the balcony, wine glasses in hand. Eliza took a sip and then sighed, "Will they ever understand?" I looked at her, the setting sun casting an orange glow on her face, and I thought about how easy it would be to just conform, to slide back into the comfortable rut of societal norms. Maybe not," I replied, "but does it really matter? We understand, and that's enough for me." As the days turned into months, we found that our progressive approach brought us closer. We were redefining not just how we saw each other, but also how we saw ourselves. We were continually challenging, breaking, and remolding the stereotypes that had once defined us. And through it all, the cliff didn't crumble. We were building a bridge, one conversation, one challenge at a time, leading us to a more fulfilling love. So if you're standing on that cliff, glance below, but don't let the fear of falling keep you from jumping. The view is so much more beautiful when you're free from the weight of expectations. Respecting individual identities. The silence between us felt like the calm before a storm, pregnant with unspoken words. I watched as Janet's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, her gaze fixed on the swirling brew. It was a scene all too familiar, a moment suspended in the crossfire of realization and confusion. My heart pounded with the weight of what I had to say, but I hesitated, unsure of where or how to begin. Do you ever feel like we're just drifting? I finally asked, my voice breaking the silence like a pebble thrown into still water. Janet looked up, her eyes searching mine for clues, for understanding. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind, contemplating the implications of my question. The reality was, we both knew we had been skirting around the truth for far too long. Sometimes I do, she replied softly, her tone tinged with a mix of reluctance and acceptance. There it was, a simple admission that carried the weight of an avalanche. I nodded, taking a deep breath, determined to proceed with caution and empathy. I think we need to talk about how we've been blending our identities, or rather, losing them, I said, my words carefully measured. Janet's eyebrows knitted together, a sure sign that she was mentally bracing herself for a deeper conversation. Losing them? She echoed, her voice rising slightly. What do you mean? I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the table. I mean, we've become so intertwined that sometimes I forget where I end and you begin. I think we need to create a space where both of us can exist as individuals, true to ourselves. Janet exhaled, a long, weary sigh that seemed to release months of pent-up tension. You know, I've felt that too, she admitted, her eyes growing distant as she delved into her thoughts. There are days when I catch myself doing things just because I think you'd want me to. I've started to feel like I'm slowly fading. Her words cut through me like a surgeon's blade, precise, painful, and yet liberating. It was a stark revelation to hear that she, too, had felt the weight of this amorphous existence we had created. But it also gave me a sense of renewed purpose. So, how do we honor each other's identities without drifting further apart? I asked, seeking a solution rather than wallowing in the problem. Janet's eyes sparkled with a hint of hope. Maybe we can start by encouraging each other's passions. You've always loved painting, but haven't picked up a brush in months. I miss that part of you, she said, her voice filled with genuine longing. And I've neglected my writing. We should carve out time for those things that make us uniquely us. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Yes, let's do that. And let's also communicate more openly, without fear of judgment. We need to feel safe to be our true selves, even if it means occasional discomfort. The storm that had been on the horizon now felt more like a refreshing downpour, clearing the stifling air and bringing new growth. Our commitment to respecting each other's identities was not just a promise but a lifeline, a way to navigate the choppy waters of our relationship. In that moment, as we sat there holding hands over our now cold coffees, I realized that honoring each other's uniqueness was not a road to separation but a bridge to deeper connection. It was a promise to truly see each other, to recognize and celebrate the individuals we were and still aspire to be. Chapter 13. Building Trust in Relationships. Consistency and Reliability. It was a chilly autumn evening when it struck me. How could trust ever truly take root without the cornerstone of consistency? The thought was as persistent as the wind billowing through my open window. I had seen too many relationships crumble under the weight of uncertainty, the kind that breeds from unreliable promises and sporadic efforts. In my past, I wasn't exactly a paragon of reliability. Cancelled plans and erratic communication were hallmarks of my dating life. A date would be scheduled, only for me to later reconsider and cancel on a whim. My inconsistencies created an ever-widening rift, making any bonding moments feel like a mirage in a desert, visible but never quite attainable. It was with Kyra that everything began to change. She refused to be entertained by fleeting whims or fickle desires. Show up or show out, she had calmly stated one brisk evening as we stood outside her apartment. Her eyes met mine in an unflinching gaze, as if searching my soul for evidence of permanence. I knew that if I couldn't anchor myself, I'd lose her. Determined to take this challenge head-on, I started with small yet consistent actions. Each scheduled date was now sacrosanct. I made it a point to follow through, regardless of unforeseen inconveniences. The smile that would light up Kyra's face each time I arrived on time was my silent reassurance. Trust was being built, brick by dependable brick. But consistency wasn't just about showing up physically, it required emotional presence as well. There were nights we delved into deep conversations, dreams, fears, and even the seemingly trivial quirks that made us who we were. I made it a rule to actively listen, to remember details and follow up on them. Every recollected point of interest, every accurate recall of shared jokes, became the fabric that wove us closer together. Kyra reciprocated this effort. With every dependable action, we mirrored each other's energy, building a fortress of trust around us. The once shaky foundation transformed into stable ground. Over time, reliability transitioned from an effort to a natural extension of our being. We became synonymous with dependability. If we planned a weekend hike, it wasn't just penciled in, it was etched in stone. What I didn't anticipate, however, was how this consistency would transcend our relationship and seep into other facets of my life. Work deadlines became more manageable, friendship stronger, and personal goals clearer. The newfound stability was both intoxicating and liberating. It was as if anchoring myself to reliable actions in one area created a ripple effect, improving my entire existence. One evening, as we lay on a blanket under the vast tapestry of stars, Kyra turned to me. "Do you trust me?" she asked quietly. I didn't hesitate. "With my whole heart," I replied. She smiled, a confirmation of the journey we had undertaken, transforming from mere acquaintances into reliable partners. There, under the night sky, it became evident that consistency and reliability were more than just virtues. They were the essence of trust, the invisible thread that tethered us together. And in that moment, surrounded by constellations older than time, I realized how irreplaceable this feeling was. The real revelation came just before the night ended. We were packing up the blanket when Kyra said, "I've been offered a job in another city." The words hung in the air, immediately turning our serene world chaotic, a sharp reminder that maintaining consistency isn't without its challenges. Open and honest communication. In the dim light of a cozy cafe nestled in the heart of the city, I found my mind drifting to the core essence of relationships: open and honest communication. It's a curious thing, isn't it? How words, those seemingly simple combinations of letters, can build bridges or create chasms between two souls. I'd always considered myself an advocate of transparency, but it wasn't until I met Emma that I truly began to understand its transformative power. Our relationship started with the usual butterflies and excitement, the rush of discovering someone new. But as weeks turned into months, the initial sheen of infatuation began to fade, revealing the complexities beneath. It was during one of our evening walks by the river that I first sensed the undercurrent of tension. Emma had been quieter than usual, her laughter less frequent, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. One evening, after another silent walk, I decided to break the ice. "Emma," I said, taking a deep breath, "I feel like there's something on your mind. I want us to be open with each other, no matter how difficult it might be." She stopped in her tracks, looking at me with a mixture of surprise and relief. "It's just..." I've been worried about how to tell you this, she confessed, her voice trembling. I have this fear that if I'm completely honest about my feelings, you'll think less of me. Her vulnerability struck a chord deep within me. It was a moment of revelation, as I realized that my own fears had mirrored hers. Emma, the last thing I want is for you to feel like you can't be yourself with me. Let's promise to always be truthful, even if it's hard. I believe that honesty is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. From that day forward, we took deliberate steps to cultivate a culture of openness between us. We set aside time each week to talk, truly talk, about our fears, our dreams, and even the little things that bothered us. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of discomfort and tears, but there was also a growing sense of trust and intimacy that made every struggle worthwhile. One rainy afternoon, as we sat by the window of that same cafe, sipping on our lattes, Emma turned to me with a glint in her eyes. You know, she said softly, I used to think keeping certain things to myself was a way to protect our relationship. But now, I see that real love thrives on transparency. It's liberating, isn't it? To be seen and heard for who we truly are. I smiled, acknowledging the truth in her words. It is, I agreed. And it makes me feel closer to you than ever before. With every open conversation, our bond grew stronger, fortified by the trust and understanding that came with being completely truthful with one another. As I reflect on our journey, I realize that fostering an environment where transparency is valued and practiced is not just a commitment but a continuous effort. It requires courage to be vulnerable and a willingness to listen without judgment. But the reward, I've discovered, is immeasurable, a depth of connection that transforms love from a fleeting emotion into an enduring partnership. In the end, it's the honesty, the raw, unfiltered truth, that truly binds two hearts together. And for that, I'm endlessly grateful. Rebuilding trust after betrayal. The cold, leaden silence hung between us, each second stretching into an eternity. Trust shattered is an odd thing. It clings to everything, a shadow that colors every glance, every word. Betrayal had left its toxic fingerprints all over my heart. The first step, they say, is acknowledging the pain. It's strange to think that something as shattering as heartache demands recognition. But there I was, facing the monumental task of naming my agony. I feel betrayed, I had whispered into the oppressive quiet, my voice trembling. Admitting it was like bearing my soul to a storm, necessary, terrifying. Next came the decision to heal. Easy to say, but harder to commit to. Deciding to rebuild trust required more than just a desire to patch things up. It demanded a raw, relentless honesty. I realized that words had to be bolstered by actions. Consistency would be our scaffold. We set boundaries and agreed upon open communication, small steps creating the path back to trust. Healing isn't linear. It's a jagged, tumultuous journey with setbacks that sting sharper than the original betrayal. I remember one night vividly. I woke from a nightmare, my mind a maze of twisted fears. Doubt had slithered back in, whispering insidiously, filling the gaps of my subconscious. It took everything in me to reach out, to tell him that I was scared, that I needed reassurance. Patience became our new mantra. I had to learn to trust the process, even when every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. Therapy sessions became sacred spaces where wounds were exposed to the light. Listening was just as important as speaking. Misunderstandings peeled away layer by layer. Slowly, the burden of constant suspicion began to lighten. The most critical part of healing was forgiveness, not just of him, but of myself. Forgiveness was the balm that eased the burn of betrayal. It wasn't about forgetting the hurt, but rather about releasing its hold on the present. In forgiving, I reclaimed a piece of myself that betrayal had stolen. Restoring faith required more than just courage. It asked for an unflinching commitment. Trust wasn't handed back in one grand gesture. It was rebuilt piece by piece, through countless small actions. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight of rebuilding felt too heavy to bear. But in those moments, I remembered why we were doing this, for the love that survived even the darkest times. It required vulnerability. Letting him back in, little by little, meant opening myself up to the possibility of future pain. But with each small leap of faith, I felt the fragile threads of trust begin to weave their way back into the fabric of our relationship. Acts of kindness were no longer just gestures. They were bricks in a wall we were rebuilding together. In the end, rebuilding trust after betrayal was about more than just repairing a relationship. It was about growth, about creating something stronger and more resilient than what had existed before. It was about two flawed individuals choosing to face the wreckage together, hand in hand, with a shared commitment to a future forged in the fires of their past. Chapter 14. Maintaining Independence in Committed Relationships. Balancing Togetherness and Individuality. When I first met Alice, I was struck by her vibrancy. She had this way of lighting up a room, while maintaining an enviable balance between independence and togetherness. We quickly fell into the rhythm of dating, adventurous weekends, cozy movie nights, and deep conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. Yet, as the newness began to wear off, I found myself struggling to keep up with this balance. Our lives were blends of shared moments and personal pursuits. I loved the time we spent together, but I also cherished my solo pursuits, my Saturday morning runs, coding marathons, and the quiet evenings spent lost in a book. Alice seemed to handle her own interests with grace. She had her yoga classes, her painting, and nights out with her friends. It all seemed so seamless for her, and I wanted that for us. One night, after an especially enlightening conversation with my friend Mike, I realized the importance of vocalizing my feelings. Hey Alice, can we talk?" I asked, a hint of nervousness lacing my voice. She looked up from her sketchpad, her eyes inviting despite the seriousness in my tone. We sat across from each other, and I began to speak about my fear of losing myself while trying to be the perfect boyfriend. To my surprise, Alice listened intently, nodding along. When I finished, she reached for my hand. "I understand, and I want you to know that it's okay to need your own space," she said softly. Loving each other doesn't mean losing our individuality." Her words were like a balm to my anxious heart. We spent the next hour discussing how we could better support each other's passions, while still nurturing our relationship. We made a pact to regularly check in with each other about our needs, both as individuals and as a couple. Some weeks we would devote more time to shared activities, while other times we would focus on our personal pursuits. It wasn't about keeping score, but ensuring we both felt valued and respected. The more we communicated, the easier it became to find that sweet spot between togetherness and individuality. One particularly vivid day stands out. I had planned a long hike alone to reset my mind. As I laced up my boots, Alice approached me with a smile. "Enjoy your hike today. I'm going to spend some time in the studio," she said. It was a small moment, but it encapsulated the trust and understanding we had built. There was no resentment in her voice, only support. Later that night, as we reconnected over dinner, it was as if our time apart had made our togetherness even more meaningful. We shared stories of our separate days, our laughter echoing through the room, bridging any gap that our individuality might have created. I realized then that balancing our own needs with the needs of our relationship wasn't an obstacle to overcome. It was the key to our happiness. As I looked at Alice, her eyes filled with the same vibrant light that had first drawn me to her, I knew we had found something rare. We were not just two people in love, but two individuals choosing to grow together. The balance of our lives had become our greatest strength, and it was a dance we were learning to master, step by harmonious step. Supporting each other's growth. I remember the day we decided to talk about our dreams, sitting on that old park bench, the one with the chipped paint yet unbeatable view of the lake. It was a breezy Saturday, with the sun casting a golden hue over everything, making even the most mundane moments feel poetic. We hadn't planned for it, but somehow the conversation steered towards what we wanted out of our lives. There was an inexplicable sense of vulnerability, but also an overwhelming sense of possibility. That talk marked the beginning of a journey neither of us could have foreseen. Sarah leaned in, her eyes glistening with the reflection of the water. "I've always wanted to start my own bakery," she confessed. "Ever since I was a little girl, the idea of creating something that brings joy to others has fascinated me. But it feels like such a distant dream, impractical, really. What if it fails?" Her voice had an undertone of fear mixed with hope. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "What if it doesn't fail? What if it's the most successful bakery this town has ever seen?" I knew the statistics about small businesses, but I also knew that without giving it a try, she'd never know. "What can we do to make it less daunting?" I asked, realizing that her dream now felt like a shared quest. We started making plans, listing out resources, and talking to people who had navigated similar paths. Nights were often spent poring over notebooks filled with recipes, business plans, and marketing ideas. We learned a lot about bread and pastries, but also about patience, stamina, and resilience. Most importantly, we learned about each other. The meticulousness with which Sarah crafted each pastry spoke volumes about her dedication. It inspired me to delve deeper into my own aspirations and drive. Months went by, and Sarah finally opened her bakery. Seeing her dreams take shape was like watching a painting gradually come to life with every brushstroke. There were days of self-doubt, and times when the financial spreadsheets made everything look bleak. But with every challenge, our bond grew stronger. Celebrations weren't just about successful sales, they were about our collective perseverance, and the joy of seeing each other thrive. One chilly evening, after the bakery's lights had dimmed and the last customer had left, we sat together enjoying the aroma of freshly baked bread. Sarah looked at me with a sense of fulfillment in her eyes I'd never seen before. "You know," she said, "I don't think I would have made it this far without your support. You made me believe in a dream that even I questioned at times." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that no amount of hot coffee could imitate. "We made it happen together," I replied. "Your dream became mine, and in helping you, I found the courage to chase my own ambitions." As we wrapped ourselves in the comfort of that thought, an unspoken promise lingered in the air. This was growth, not just personal, but mutual. A journey where uplifting each other wasn't just an abstract concept, but a tangible reality. As we left the bakery that night, hand in hand, I realized that our story had truly just begun. Fostering mutual respect. The first time I met Claire, I felt an instant connection, a spark that was more than just physical attraction. We spent hours talking about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. But as the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I realized that maintaining this connection would take more than just shared interests and physical chemistry. It required a foundation built on mutual respect. We often hear about the importance of respect in a relationship, but living it out every day is another story. Claire and I both had our quirks and differences. She was meticulous about planning, while I thrived on spontaneity. Initially, we tried to change each other, often leading to frustrating arguments. One evening, after a particularly heated disagreement, Claire sighed and said, "Why can't you just respect the way I do things?" Her words echoed in my mind long after, and I began to realize the truth in them. Mutual respect isn't about agreeing on everything, but appreciating and valuing each other's differences. I started to see the actions she took not as quirks, but as parts of who she was. When she wanted to plan our dates down to the minute, it wasn't because she was controlling, but because she valued our time together so much that she wanted to make every moment memorable. When I wanted to take spontaneous trips, it wasn't because I didn't value her plans, but because those moments of adventure made me feel alive. Over time, we developed a deeper understanding of each other. We found ways to merge our styles, like planning spontaneous weekend getaways. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was ours, built on mutual respect and a willingness to understand each other's perspectives. The realization was liberating. Respect allowed us to be ourselves in the relationship without fear of judgment or the pressure to conform. One rainy afternoon, a memory stands vivid in my mind. Claire and I were at a coffee shop, both engrossed in our respective hobbies. She was reading a novel while I was sketching in my notebook. A comfortable silence enveloped us. Suddenly, she looked up and said, "I love that you respect my need for quiet moments like these." I simply smiled and replied, "And I love that you understand my need to capture them in my sketches." That single moment encapsulated the essence of our relationship, a shared world where our differences were not just tolerated, but cherished. Understanding and fostering mutual respect doesn't happen overnight. It's a continuous, conscious effort. It means listening when you'd rather speak and finding a middle ground when you'd rather stand your ground. It's about valuing the other person enough to learn and grow past your differences. As Claire and I navigated the complexities of our relationship, I discovered that the respect we fostered not only strengthened our bond, but also enriched our individual selves. To this day, every disagreement, every compromise, and every loving gesture is a testament to the mutual respect we have nurtured. And it is this respect that has laid the foundation for a healthy, lasting relationship. Chapter 15. Embracing Love and Empathy. Nurturing empathy in relationships. From the moment I first met Sophia, I knew there was something different about her. She possessed a depth, a vulnerability, one that required more than just surface-level interaction. I was determined to nurture our bond, yet I found myself struggling to fully grasp her experiences and emotions. One evening over a quiet dinner, she opened up about her struggles at work. As she spoke, I noticed how her eyes dulled with exhaustion. Rather than offering superficial advice, I attempted to listen with my heart. Truly understanding her pain required me to set aside my own assumptions and judgments. Every nod, every whispered word of acknowledgement shaped a safe space where her feelings could flourish. Empathy, I learned, wasn't merely about relaying understanding through sympathetic words. It meant embracing her stories as if they were chapters of my own life. When she mentioned feeling overwhelmed, I pictured myself at her desk, piles of paperwork towering over me, the relentless ticking of the clock pushing me towards the edge. The resonance of our shared silence bonded us more than any spoken solution could have. Another challenge appeared when she wanted to discuss past relationships. This was a particularly thorny subject for me, filled with the potential for misunderstandings and hurt. But as she recounted episodes of heartache and betrayal, I found myself transported into her past. Each tale provided a glimpse into her fears, her hopes, layers that built the complex mosaic of her identity. To nurture genuine empathy, I needed to strip away the defensive walls that I had unknowingly built. One rainy afternoon, she confronted me about my tendency to emotionally withdraw. Her voice was gentle yet firm, and I realized that to be present in her world, I had to invite her into mine. Vulnerability had to be a two-way street. Slowly, I began to share my own insecurities, my fears of inadequacy and failure. In doing so, I felt an emotional bridge forming between us, gradually making us inseparable companions on this intricate journey of love. Our relationship was far from perfect, and there were moments of friction that challenged our commitment to understanding each other. Yet, each time we navigated through a storm, our empathy acted as a compass, guiding us back to a place of connection and intimacy. The foundation we laid became unshakable, grounded in the knowledge that we could face anything as long as we endeavored to see the world through each other's eyes. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, I turned to her and said, "Thank you for letting me into your world, for allowing me the privilege to feel what you feel." She smiled, her eyes shimmering with the promise of many more sunsets together. Kindness and compassion. When I first met Elena, it was her kindness that stood out to me the most. She was the type of person who would go out of her way to make others feel comfortable, even if it meant inconveniencing herself. It wasn't just the grand gestures, it was the little things. Holding doors, remembering small details about your life, sending texts just to check in. Kindness was interwoven into the fabric of her being, and it was utterly captivating. One evening, I remember we were walking through the park, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. An elderly man was trying to retrieve his hat, which had blown into a pond. Without a second thought, Elena removed her shoes, rolled up her jeans, waded in, and retrieved it for him. It wasn't the act itself, it was the smile she gave him as she handed it back. The very essence of kindness. That was Elena. A living, breathing embodiment of compassion and love. As our relationship grew, I began to understand the power of small, consistent acts of kindness and their impact on us. Whether it was her surprising me with my favorite coffee on hectic work mornings or leaving sweet notes in unexpected places, these acts made our bond stronger. But it wasn't one-sided. Motivated by her example, I found joy in looking for ways to make her day a little brighter, a little easier. I realized that kindness wasn't just about grand gestures, but a series of small actions and considerations that collectively built a foundation of trust and love. Then came a day that tested the strength of our compassionate foundation. I had missed an important date, our one-year anniversary, caught up in a whirlwind of work deadlines. I was devastated, expecting anger or disappointment when I rushed home with flowers and guilt in my heart. Instead, I found a lovingly set dinner table, a homemade meal, and Elena smiling at me as if nothing was amiss. "It's okay," she said softly, embracing me. "I understand. We celebrate us every day, not just on marked dates." Her words didn't just comfort me, they transformed me. Compassion wasn't just forgiving someone, it was understanding them, seeing their struggles through a lens of kindness. That night, over the meal she had lovingly prepared, we talked. Not about the missed anniversary, but about what kindness and compassion meant to us both. We promised to prioritize these values in every interaction, not just with each other, but with everyone we encountered. In the years that followed, this commitment to kindness and compassion became the cornerstone of our relationship. Challenges came and went, as they do in any life, but our loving, supportive atmosphere never wavered. Whenever a disagreement arose, we approached it with understanding and empathy, always choosing to see the good in each other first. One particularly difficult winter, my business faced significant financial strain. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and on the brink of giving up. Elena stood by me, a pillar of support, not through grand gestures, but through simple, consistent acts of love. Each cup of tea she made, each reassuring hug, and every late-night conversation we shared were reminders that kindness wasn't just a trait. It was a practice, a commitment to be compassionate even through the hardest times. And so, through our journey, I learned that kindness and compassion were not just ideals to aspire to, but the very lifeblood of a healthy, thriving relationship. They nurtured understanding, deepened love, and established a safe haven in each other's hearts. Prioritizing these values in every interaction, we didn't just build a relationship but a loving, supportive atmosphere where both of us could flourish. It's a lesson I carry with me always, knowing that in the world of dating, and beyond, a little kindness goes a long, long way. Creating a loving and supportive environment. When I first met Jessica, I never imagined how profoundly our relationship would change our lives. From the outset, it wasn't just about the chemistry, but the profound understanding we had even in our silences. Early on, we decided we wanted to create a space where we could both be ourselves, grow, and thrive. It wasn't just about being in love, it was about creating a life infused with love. Building this loving environment wasn't always straightforward. We had to be intentional about it from day one. I remember one evening, sitting in our small, one-bedroom apartment, and having a heart-to-heart talk about our dreams and fears. It was a vulnerable moment, yet incredibly powerful. We promised to always make our home a sanctuary, a place where we felt safe to express anything without judgment. One of the key things that made a difference was our commitment to communication. We established a practice of regular check-ins, where we would talk openly about what was going well and what needed attention. During these moments, we'd ensure our phones were off and it was just the two of us, focused entirely on our partnership. Listening actively and empathetically, we learned that understanding goes beyond hearing words. It's about grasping the emotions and intentions behind them. We also made it a point to celebrate each other's successes. No achievement was too small to acknowledge. Jessica started a new job in marketing, and even the tiniest victories, like acing a presentation or getting praise from her boss, were celebrated with as much fanfare as possible. It fostered a sense of shared joy and genuine happiness for each other's accomplishments. Creating a loving environment also meant supporting each other's growth, even when it was uncomfortable. There was a period when I was contemplating a career change, something risky and out of my comfort zone. I was petrified. Jessica stood by me, encouraging me to pursue my passion, even though it meant tightening our belts for a while. Her unwavering support was like a safety net, giving me the courage to take the leap. However, building this environment wasn't without challenges. There were times when stress and misunderstandings would creep in, threatening our haven. During one particularly tense week, we had a disagreement that left both of us feeling unheard. It was in these moments that we realized the importance of humility and patience. Apologies and genuine efforts to understand each other became our tools for mending the cracks. As time passed, our dedication to creating this nurturing space paid off. Our bond grew stronger, becoming a resilient shield against the world's chaos. In a world where everything seemed so transient, our relationship became a constant, a source of strength and solace. Friends often asked how we managed to maintain such a harmonious relationship, and our answer was simple. It took work, consistency, and a whole lot of love. Through this journey, I understood that the essence of a loving and supportive environment is the commitment to shared growth and an unwavering belief in each other. Every small gesture, every difficult conversation, every celebration is a thread in the fabric of our life together. This space we've built isn't just a backdrop to our story, it is our story. But it's not just about living in this perfect bubble. It's also about being prepared to face the next challenge together, stronger and more united. And as we sit together, soaking in the joy of our shared successes and the learning from our failures, I know our journey has only just begun. The road ahead might be uncertain, but with Jessica by my side, I feel ready to embrace whatever comes next. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey through the intricacies of modern dating in red flags, green flags. Navigating the modern dating landscape, brought to you by Mindful Literary. We hope that this audiobook has provided you with valuable insights, practical advice, and a deeper understanding of the complexities of relationships. As we conclude, remember that recognizing red flags and embracing green flags is not just about navigating the dating world. It's also about fostering a healthy relationship with yourself. By cultivating self-awareness, practicing self-compassion, and setting healthy boundaries, you can create a foundation of self-love and respect that will enhance all your relationships. Embrace the lessons learned, apply the strategies discussed, and continue to grow both individually and in your relationships. Trust your instincts, communicate openly, and always prioritize your well-being and happiness. The journey of love and connection is ongoing, and with the knowledge you've gained, you're well equipped to navigate it with confidence and grace. We wish you all the best on your path to finding meaningful connections and lasting love. Remember, you deserve a relationship filled with respect, support, and genuine care. Thank you for listening, and may your journey be filled with joy, growth, and fulfilling relationships. If you've enjoyed this audiobook, please consider leaving a review and sharing it with others who might benefit from its insights. Stay tuned for more enlightening content from Mindful Literary. Until next time, take care and keep navigating with wisdom and heart.